Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
Байрактар. Байрактар.
Байрактар.
Байрактар.
Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello everyone, I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, everybody. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 238 of the news.
And of course, we're going to be reporting on the past 48 hours of the war in Ukraine, both day 237 and day 238. But before we begin, we have massive news about the Sunday night fundraiser. We were able to raise $22,000 in support of revived soldiers of Ukraine. What a figure. And of course, a massive thanks to a load of y'all who were watching that night. Of course, a massive amount of y'all contributed huge portions of what we raised that night. And of course, a huge shout out to Mark Slava Ukraini, who donated almost half of what we raised that night. And so huge thanks to everyone in the Lee Spring Army who made that possible. That is the 31st fundraiser we have ever run on this channel. And somehow we've now raised combined around $562,000 in support for Ukraine. We're now only $38,000 away from $600,000, and it's now begging the question, how long will it take until we reach 1 million? But, you know,
we're crazy. Yeah, that's crazy to think we're that close to 1 million.
Yeah, we're starting to get really close. We're starting to round that corner and get towards that direction. So huge thanks to everyone again. And of course, it is a massive help to the soldiers on the ground. We don't know how many soldiers can be helped out with $22,000, but even if it was just one, it means a lot. And I thank each and every one of y'all, and I'm sure that the soldiers who benefit from these rehabilitations and treatments would like to thank y'all as well if they could find out where the Lee Spring Army was. Of course, the Lee Spring Army sends its regards and in the best way possible. But before we get ahead of ourselves, it's time to cover the news. So we're going to be moving into Russia. It looks, Matthew, like we don't have a Russian propaganda segment anymore. I wonder why. Yeah, I wonder why. It's not like anything is going terribly for them in Ukraine. It's not like there's anything that would make them a little bit doom and gloom. I wonder why we haven't had a Russian propaganda segment for about 4 or 5 days. I'll leave that up to y'all to find out. Leave a comment in the live chat if you have a good idea of the reason why we haven't had a news segment like that in the past few days, but I'm kind of curious now as to why they're so quiet. But anyways, we're going to be
Did he get worked?
Maybe they got orked. Maybe.
Is that the new term now?
I think that is. And also another thing, before we move on, this is also a huge deal that happened, and I completely forgot to address it. Matthew uploaded his first special, his first standalone video last night on this channel, at 10 p.m. Eastern Time on Monday. It was only about 5 minutes long, but that 5 minutes, I gotta say, was filled with humor, quality, and content. And if Matthew is going to be setting the bar for videos, it is going to be pretty high. So I would love if everyone gave Matthew a huge thanks for that video. It was a cool one. I really loved it. In fact, usually, in case you all don't know, I'm a huge pessimist behind the scenes whenever I'm making a video. I usually think they won't end up doing well. And so for the first time ever watching a video, I was actually incredibly impressed with Matthew's video. I was enthusiastic about it going up, and it looks like it's done really well, and a lot of people have really loved it. So just in case if you want to take over here, Matthew, what are your plans for the future with these videos?
So first up, folks, thank you very much for the support on the video. I was wondering how it was going to go, but it looks like overall it was very positive. So I'm glad everyone enjoyed it. And also, a second one is already in the works to go ahead and satisfy popular demand. It's going to be a little bit more production quality behind it, but generally the same kind of like joking format, sort of making, you know, a light situation out of a heavy topic. But hopefully you'll like the second one as well. I don't really have a date it's going to come out yet, but it will be out, yeah, in the near future, maybe in a few weeks.
And so I gotta say, it's a pretty cool idea. I think hopefully Matthew will have one out incredibly soon. Of course, we're gonna be working on to get another video out, but still, there's no rush at all. You can't rush hard, as they say. Anyways, it's now time to get to the major news of the night, what y'all have all come here for, which is the actual news. We're going to be starting off on yesterday's news on day 237 in Kyiv. This is something we weren't able to cover during the Sunday night fundraiser because video evidence and footage had not come out about it yet, but we are finally able to cover it tonight, starting off with our first clip of the Ukrainian police trying to shoot at the Shahed drones that were flying straight into the center of Kyiv. Here's a video from the perspective of one of these Ukrainian policemen. When you see him stepping out of his car, getting his AK, and when you see him eyeballing the skies, his gunfire erupts in the distance, and now they are getting ready too to try and fire at the drones coming in. They're now firing at the drone, attempting to shoot it down before it can reach its target. We can't see the drone yet. It just flew right over him and exploded behind him. And they're now running away. Trying to get out of the shrapnel. They're now turning around and they're running back towards the cars and back towards the explosion to go and survey the damage. Of course, huge credit goes to the Ukrainian policemen who tried to heroically shoot down the drones, but unfortunately, a large amount of these Shaheds would make it through, and we can see a lot of videos showing that exact thing happening. Here we can see one of these Shahed, the 136s that failed to be shot down, hitting a residential neighborhood inside of Kyiv. Here's the video of that, and at the moment, we don't know the exact figures, although it appears to be in the dozens of Ukrainians that were killed in these Shahed drone attacks. All of these attacks were not targeted at strategic infrastructure. Every single one of these drones, from video evidence, were targeted directly at residential buildings, hitting them most likely where there were people inside, whether they be whole families, just children, or mothers. It did hit and kill civilians. Every single one of them did. And so with that, here's the next video.
Опять летит, убери малых.
You see the Shahed flying in a steep dive and ramming straight into that residential building behind this one on screen.
Туда, за дом.
It's sad to see that this kind of stuff happens because the Russians lose, and the Russians decide that the best way to try and pretend that they're winning, or to try and make it seem like the Ukrainian populace ought to give up on this war, is to directly attack them and try and kill people that really had nothing to do with this war since the start. Moving on into the next clip, we can also see another Shahed making its bombing run into the city of Kyiv as well, from a different perspective, and here's this video, and from what we can also tell, it's an entirely different drone. We hear the gunfire further down the street.
Блядь. Ты не видишь его? Стреляй, если увидишь.
We hear them continuing to fire at the drone.
Летит, летит.
We can now hear the sound of the engine whirring overhead.
Стреляй, стреляй по нему сразу. Вон летит, стреляй!
We now see these policemen trying to shoot down the drone as well, and we can now see it's already on its steep dive towards its target.
Блядь, нет, он падает! Блядь, ложись!
The drone flies over and then explodes.
Ебать! Охуеть!
Goodness.
Блядь, страшно нахуй. Блядь.
We have one final video of these drone attacks in Kyiv, which I'll also show y'all right here as well. The fact that the Ukrainians are continuously attacked, mercilessly, the civilian population directly, by the Russians, as a heinous act, as a crime against humanity, and I can't believe that we watch this stuff still. And and some people still question whether the Russians are the good guys or not, and a lot of people, well, not a lot, it's actually quite a small group, still think that the Russians are the good guys, and that they're out there trying to win this war and protect people, but from what we just saw in Kyiv, and the amount of residential buildings that were directly hit by these highly explosive Shahed drones, you've got to think that what the Russians have done is sick. And the Russians need to pay. At this point, I don't really think that sanctions should be lifted after this war. I think that they should last well on into the future as punishment and reparation for what's been done to Ukraine during this war. To think that every time the Russians lose, instead of actually trying to conduct new strategies and new tactics on the battlefield to see if they can turn around their battlefield fortunes, they instead just decide that the best thing to do is to go and attack the civilians outright in Ukraine, because that ought to do something, and that ought to teach them a lesson. And that is the sickest thing that I've ever seen in the modern war in the modern world. That used to be how things were done back in the medieval ages, and back during, it wasn't even done in the 1700s. The only time I can think about those kinds of acts of barbarism just being the norm would have been the Middle Ages. In World War II, they didn't even have that kind of philosophy. Mass bombings of cities, specifically by the Allies, were done to hit important, I guess you could say, military industry. And of course, we can get into the massive issue of why carpet bombing happened with the Allies. But really, the only people I can think of in modern history that have done something similar to this, trying to punish the civilian population for the bravery and the professionalism of their military, would have been the Nazis conducting the Blitz on the British in the Second World War. And that was a whole 70 or 80 years ago. Or, you know, you could pull any page out of Soviet history over the past, I don't know, 80, 90 years, and you could probably find a lot of instances of them doing that to, like, the Afghans or the Chechens or really anyone else who stood up against them. But still, the fact stands that what they're doing is a complete atrocity, and we need to support Ukraine with even more weapons. We need to support them with so many arms and weapons that they can do what the United States does and drop a JDAM on 3 guys if need be. That's honestly what I think we should do at this point. Because to think that we stand by and watch the Russians do this kind of sick and appalling behavior 8 months into a 238-day-long war is about enough. But with that, we're now going to be moving on from the city of Kyiv, and we're going to be moving to the location unknowns, where we have some pretty interesting clips. Some really interesting clips, as a matter of fact. Starting off with our first one, where we can see that no Russian can ambush a Ukrainian successfully, at least according to this footage. And so here's the video of a Ukrainian reacting immediately to a improvised Russian ambush. We can hear the explosion overhead and some gunfire begins. And we now see these soldiers firing over the front of their truck at the Russians that have tried to shoot at them. We now see them continue to fire at the Russians as the truck continues to advance. They're using the truck as cover. And also, you can tell this guy's pretty smart, Matthew, because you know what he's doing?
What?
He's standing behind the engine block, which is the only part of the truck that probably would stop a bullet. So this guy's actually got some sense. A lot of it, actually. We can also see this guy hiding behind, I guess you could say, the rear axle, which is also where the truck is also the thickest. If you ever look at ballistics test, a bullet will actually pass through the entirety of a car, but by the time it gets to the second door frame, it begins to tumble, but it will still pass out the other side. If anyone's on that other side, they will be hit. So the best places to hide on a car or a truck is at the front, near the engine, behind the engine, and right over on the side of the wheel, or near the back, near the rear axle, so that way you can at least get half of your body some protection, at least your legs. You see them continue to advance with the truck, and it looks like the Russians have largely been unsuccessful with stopping these Ukrainians from pushing forward. We now see them advancing with a little bit faster speed, and it sounds like they were able to quell this Russian ambush about as quickly as it started. And so with that, that's the end of the video, and I like to see that the Ukrainian soldiers are so well trained and they got enough common sense and knowledge that they know things, I guess, that would be a little bit more in depth to the average person or the average soldier, especially the Russian conscript, to hide behind the engine block. And that's something that you see SWAT do in the United States whenever there's a shootout, and they've been trained to do things like that as their job. And to think that a Ukrainian soldier has gone through that kind of effort to think of the same thing as well, that says a lot about him. And so with that, that's the end of that video. We're now going to be moving into the next bit of Location Unknown news, where we can see the Russians destroy a Ukrainian S-300, a very rare and modern surface-to-air missile system that the Ukrainians have. Let's watch this video as the Russians destroy it. We can see it right there, and we can now see the drone going for it, and it hits it. So let's watch the footage from here. You see the drone flying in, and it hits the S-300. But oddly enough, something strange happens. there's no explosion. That's because that S-300 was a decoy, and the Russians fell for it. We can see a small little fire break out there at the bottom, but I have seen S-300s get hit before by something as small as a 7.62 round, and those things go up like atomic bombs. SAMs are made with a large amount of solid fuel propellant, and so when they get hit, they explode. But this S-300 here did not explode in that fashion. The Russians fell face first into believing that this decoy was an S-300 and wasted a suicide drone on it. And so with that, that's the end of that little video. And once again, it's showing that the keen eye of the Russians really isn't there. The keen eye of Ukrainians with their combat knowledge and intelligence is actually pretty intense. We just saw, well, pretty extensive. We just saw that a second ago in another clip. But in this one, you can see that the Russians are falling behind. As they say, they're lacking a little. We're going to be moving on into today's news, day 238. Where we can see, and let me also close down these Steam notifications. I don't know why that popped up. Anyways, we're going to be moving into day 238's news, where we see that the Ukrainians destroyed a UR-77 Meteorite. These things are the mine-clearing vehicles, and let me show y'all one real quick, and let me explain to y'all why this is a little funny in a way to see one of these things go. So this thing is the Russians' version of a mine-clearing vehicle. They use these things to fire a large explosive charge, you can see it right there, out of the top of the vehicle and down range a little bit attached to a wire. That wire and the explosive charge at the end will then explode, and hypothetically it clears a path that will be free of mines. Now, if you know anything about what the Russians have been using this thing for during this war, they've actually been using it to target civilians in places like Mariupol, where they would fire these things into a residential area and then let it explode on the side of an apartment building. So it's nice to see that the Ukrainians were able to obliterate one of these stupid things right here. When you see the UR-77 sitting there unsuspecting, and it's gone.
Oh.
It's gone.
Dang, yeah, it's gone.
Let's watch that
nani?
again. Oh, nani? Oh yeah, there it goes, the UR-77. It looks like most of it went to the left, if I'm seeing this correctly, Matthew. Yeah.
Looks like it.
Yeah, it looks like. I don't think they'll be using that one again. But then again, the Russians are always trying to use old derelict vehicles as much as they can. And as the smoke clears, there's literally nothing left. The whole UR-77 is gone. Just gone. And so it's nice to see that they finally got one of those things, because their use in this war has pretty much been an atrocity, especially on the Russian side. Moving on into the next clip, we can see a Ukrainian peon, once again, named after a peony, not the peon as in an insult, but we can see the Ukrainians firing off one of these things again. We can see them loading the shell. We now see the mechanical arm pushing the shell towards the breach, ramming the shell. We can now see the next crewman with the charge. He now places the charge onto the rammer. The rammer then pushes it into the breach as well. Are they playing music in the background?
Yes, they are. It sounds like American music, too.
It sounds like American music. But it's in the background, so I don't think we can get copyrighted for that. So we're going to let this continue. Wait a minute, I know that song. I've actually heard it before. It's a Ukrainian song. But anyways.
Oh, it is?
Yes, it is. It is actually a Ukrainian song. It's actually a pretty solid one. I forgot the exact name. I'd have to pull it up again. But it's a good one. We now see the peons ready to fire. And it fires. Hopefully that rain goes down round and hits something, or that round goes down range and hits something. But with that, that's the end of that little video, and it's very nice to see that the Ukrainians are using all of the artillery at their disposal to try and push the Russians out of the country. Moving on into the next clip, we can see something pretty funny happening with some Russian guys as well. Specifically, it's not working. When you see the Russian right here, with one arm, aiming one of those anti-drone gun things at the drone. This is, of course, a Russian, and the drone's Ukrainian. Now, my question is, how did they get a hold of one of these things? They probably, and the answer to that is that they probably captured it at some point earlier on in the war and have just kept it around. But it looks like it isn't working, because after he aimed it at the drone, you can see that the drone hasn't disconnected. It's still operating just fine. When you see him aiming it up into the air again, not really aiming it at the drone. It looks like he's aiming it below, probably because he's so drunk he can't really tell the difference and he's seeing two of them. But it looks like he's just not getting the drone, or that thing isn't working. The drone's now setting themselves up for a nice time to take a good look at him. And we now see the bomblet being dropped, and... hang on. We now see the Russians moving around. It looks like the bomblet actually fell without exploding. Well, wait a minute. Correction. It had a delayed fuse or something similar. It looks like it did hit the Russian with the anti-drone gun. You now see them trying to get their way out of there. But it looks like they're having some small difficulties with it. They're now moving into the next dugout because 10 yards away from the last one will definitely save them from the drone flying on top of them. We all know that's a tried and true tactic that the Russians always do, and it never fails. We can also see him carrying the stupid anti-drone gun, even after it didn't work. I mean, like, if at that point being hit by a bomblet directly, I would kind of just drop that thing and give up on the idea of it working.
Man, he's got to sell that. He's got to go pawn that at the pawn shop.
Yeah. He's going to take the computer chip out of it so his washing machine will keep working that he stole. And so with that, that's the end of the video. While we got literally just a half second of audio at the end. And so with that, it's nice to see that the Russians have no idea how to actually field those anti-drone guns that the Ukrainians had previously in the war and are still using to a great extent now. And that the drone was still able to complete its job. And so with that, we're going to be moving on to the last clip of Location Unknown News, where we can see a Russian T-72 getting hit. And it's a solid hit. When you see the tank smoking, we can hear some drum beating. And it looks like it got hit. I don't know about you guys, you know, because there's one thing I'll say is that we always have people around, a very small amount, and they usually don't last long, that know everything. So I can't say that this thing got hit, but let me know in the live chat, was this thing hit or not? I would have to say, in my opinion, probably not. But it is smoking. Most likely some kind of it's coolant leakage or something. They need more coolant. Also, that's a T-80 BVM. Ooh. Another $4 million T-80 BVM that was destroyed. And so with that, that's the end of that little video. And let me know in the live chat, was this tank destroyed by an ATGM? Yes or no? Because sometimes I have to have confirmation to make sure that I'm not just seeing things. But with that, we're going to be moving on out of the Location Unknown News. And of course, we didn't have a lot of it today. We only had 6 bits of Location Unknown News. But still, pretty good to see nonetheless. I like to, of course, watch the Ukrainians obliterate the Russians solely for the purpose of the war crimes that they commit on a daily basis. And that's something that a lot of people, for some reason, don't get. Maybe because every once in a while I get someone who says, oh, it's distasteful that you say certain things in certain ways about the Russians, but I don't know if they've been watching the same stuff I've been watching, of the kinds of atrocities the Russians commit every single day of this war, but I've seen it enough to know that that what the Russians get is what's coming to them in terms of what's happening to their military. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from the Location Unknowns and down on into our Northeastern news, which we actually have a decent amount of today, including our Donetsk news and our Kherson news, and also some Russian news that I highly suggest y'all hang out for, because that is pretty interesting in its own right. But before we get to all of this news, we're going to take a quick pause, so that way we can get to the polls, address the live chats, and also so I can turn on my fan, because now it's getting incredibly hot in here. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, folks. And for the first question segment, we have 2 polls to address, like usual. So the first question said, what do you think of the drone attacks by Russia in Kyiv? Overwhelming 93% said they target civilians, war crime. 3% said, I'm not sure. And 4% said, it's war, it's nasty, but fair. Now, on this one, I'm going to have to side with the 93%, because that is extremely disgusting that they're targeting civilians with those drones. And it's very, very, very horrific. I can only imagine what the aftermath actually looks like up close. But Enforcer, what do you think?
I would definitely have to say, and agree with the 93%, that it is 100% a war crime. What the Russians have been doing this entire war, torturing civilians and killing them in droves and burying them in unmarked graves outside of Izium, Mariupol, Melitopol, and every other city that's been liberated so far, including places like Balaklia and also Kupiansk. We've seen these kinds of atrocities every single place that the Russians have been. And this is nothing more than an extension of their creative ways to try and attack, terrorize, and kill civilians all across Ukraine. Now that the Iranians have supplied them with these drones, they've gotten a little bit of a better idea of how to attack civilians and kill them the cheapest way possible for the Russians. And for that reason, I think we ought to go and revisit some of our agreements with Iran and start to renegotiate the deal, in a way. Because I think that the Iranians are providing the Russians with weapons to kill civilians. I think it's about time that we go in and maybe help the protesters and rioters of Iran with a small government change. Because I think that what they've done, supplying the Russians with these kinds of arms and weapons, is atrocious. And to think that they would be willing to do that to anyone in the world, as long as you're willing to pay the price and you're on their side, I would have to say I don't really agree with that. And I don't know about y'all, but maybe y'all agree with me too. And so with that, I hope I addressed
If only, Enforcer, if only we could actually perform an operation like that correctly by the United States. It seems like we can't do that ever correctly.
Well, you know, it would be a little bit of a tough nut to crack, because, of course, we can look into what we've done before in the Middle East and also, I guess you could say, Southwestern Asia, like Afghanistan, and it doesn't really always turn out the way we wanted it to, but at least we'd be able to get rid of the current government that's there and maybe keep one in charge for a while. I don't know. Because Afghanistan made me think that maybe sometimes the governments that come in to replace the old don't really last long once we try and leave them. But with that, we are going to be moving on to the next poll.
All right. And the next poll says, do you think NATO should apply more sanctions on Russia? Once again, 93% said yes, apply all sanctions left. 5% said maybe, and 2% said no, that would escalate things fast. Now, for me, I don't think we have to worry about escalating things at this point. It's already pretty bad. So I would probably go with apply all sanctions left, because really, what do we have to lose? I don't think Russia is going to do anything about more sanctions being applied, and I think we need to put all the pressure on them that we can. But Enforcer, what do you think about that?
I would have to say I think that we should put the harshest sanctions. In fact, I believe we should conduct a complete trade embargo on the Russians and ensure that our Western allies in Europe also support that embargo as well, to ensure that the Russian economy collapses as soon as possible. I think that's probably the most efficient way to end this war while not getting directly involved in it. And so with that, I hope that addresses that poll fairly well. And with that, if we have any others, we'll cover that. And if not, we're on to the live chat questions.
All right, and that's it for the polls. So moving on to our first super chat, which is from Livy Washington, who puts in a $50 donation. And thank you very much, Livy, for your continued support. And it's good to see you once again. She says, do you think that Russia is actually going to institute martial law and lockdown?
And I thank you so much for the support, Livy. It helps out this channel greatly and helps us to keep running. And of course, I would have to say that I think the Russians probably would institute some kind of martial law and lockdown eventually, although they haven't. I believe if they tried to do that, the civil unrest and the backlash would be so great, it would kind of negate the purpose of trying to instill some kind of order in the country. It would most likely break down the remaining and loose control of order they have left. But then again, I could be wrong. So far, though, based off of precedent, we have seen that them declaring a partial mobilization did lead to riots in places like Dagestan, or Dagestan, whatever its name. And so we can see that at least there, the Russians have some loose control, very loose control over the local population. And if they were to do something like martial law, that kind of control could probably get a lot worse. And it would also suggest that the Russian government and the Russian army is doing poorly at conducting the current war, and that they're really almost on the brink of defeat. And that could, of course, lead to the public getting freaked out and going into pandemonium, and then the government pretty much loses complete control over the whole entire situation. But with that, I thank you so much once again for the support, Livy Washington. Of course, it helps out this channel greatly, and I hope that did answer the question as best as I could. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
All right, and up next, we have a $40 super chat from Mark, Slava Ukraine, who says, "Congratulations, Matthew, the Melavora Capensis, Google it, and happy birthday." And thank you, Mark, for the happy birthday. It's once again my birthday. I think I'm 105 now at this point. But Enforcer, if you could Google that real quick and see what that means, if you have it. Otherwise, I can put it in the live chat.
Got you. Let's see. Oh, Mark's pulling out the Latin term, the scientific term, actually, for the honey badger.
No way. Is that really the term?
Yeah, that's what it means. The Melliboric capensis is a honey badger. Is that cool or what? Honestly,
That's about the highest praise you can give, Mark. Thank you.
you know what? We need to come up with something like the Order of the Honey Badger or something like that. That would be pretty cool. Just as a neat little thing. But with that, I thank you so much for the support, Mark. It helps out this channel greatly. And I'm glad that you did enjoy Matthew's video. And it seems like a lot of people really liked Matthew's video. Of course, I don't think he's going to be coming down with a set production schedule like these streams that run nightly. I think it's going to be whenever they can be made and come out. But they're going to be pretty good. And of course, they will probably always air during our empty Monday slot where we don't have a live stream running. And of course, right now, our live streams are being encroached on by another streamer, which is kind of interesting to see because,
He's a copycat.
Yeah, pretty much. But with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. It helps this channel out a lot. And thank you so much for the cool little reference to the honey badger. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again.
All right. And real quick, I did see something in the live chat that I saw from Craig Harris. He said, "Could you do a video on what may be needed to survive a nuke?" And that's actually a really good idea. I'm working on a video right now on a slightly different topic, but related to Russia. I don't want to totally blow the surprise right now, but that's actually a really good one. I'm going to write that one down because that might be maybe the third one I do. But anyways, moving on to our next super chat, we have a $27 donation from Duncan VR, who says, "All these sheep noises and also cow noises. Baba, moo, ba. Iran needs to be held accountable for supplying drones to Russia. I don't just mean sanctions. Everyone needs to tell their local politicians something needs to be done. It's a crime. Don't let them get away with it."
And I thank you so much for the support. Of course, thank you, VR. Your super chats are unmistakable because he always throws in the animal noises and tortures Matthew a pretty good bit. But to answer that, I would entirely agree that I believe we should go and sanction Iran as heavily as we can. One thing that I think we could do in that direction is to go and renegotiate every single agreement we have. For example, right now we have an agreement that is standing where we allow the Iranians to have enriched nuclear material to try and produce nuclear power plants. But I got a pretty good idea that they're trying to do something else with that, because why wouldn't Iran be doing that when you really think about it? And who would stop them? Because they're already sanctioned heavily. And so the idea of them going the extra step, because what in the world could everyone do? Sanction them more? They can't, because they're almost already at the maximum level. They could just go and make one perfectly fine, and we've kind of allowed them a little bit of leeway in having these enriched nuclear materials where they can have a little bit of room to experiment and mess around with nuclear technology. So I think we ought to go and immediately reverse that and have UN officials or U.S. officials, depending on what has to be done, to go in there and make sure that the enriched nuclear material is taken. Then if, there's a little bit of a protest, maybe we ought to go in and do something about it.
And haven't they already been caught once violating the agreement?
They have, actually. And it's a little bit concerning, not getting into American politics or anything like that, but the idea of giving a country that we've declared as a terrorist state the ability to purchase and also experiment with highly enriched radioactive materials is quite concerning to me on just the international strategic level, and to think that these people could be doing something with it is highly concerning. It's already concerning enough that the North Koreans have a small allotment of nuclear weapons, along with other fringe nations that, just exist out there. And to think that the Iranians could also get nuclear weapons, it's not really a great idea. And I think that maybe we ought to go and try and make sure that they don't have any enriched nuclear materials. And I think, and also, just to address this real quick, I think that could probably be about the best reason we would have to conduct military, well, we're not going to go the Russian way and call it a military operation to conduct a war against them, because if they have any nuclear material and they refuse for inspectors to come in and make sure they don't have any, well, then it's about time to go in there and make sure they don't have any, and also see about switching out governments in the meantime. And so with that, I hope that addresses that comment fairly well. And also make sure, because the best thing you can do in the United States to get any kind of action done is to call up your congressman or senator, well, your congressman or any of your representatives, your state governor, for example, and have it be known that you support heavier sanctions and heavier actions taken against Iran. If we do that, we could see that the Iranians might start to back off, or they might double down on sending weapons to Russia, and then that kind of gives us a good reason to do something about it. And I don't think, although I have said that they do have highly enriched radioactive material, I don't think they'd really have the ability to resist. And so with that, I hope that addresses that fairly well, and thank you so much once again for the support. And so with that, we are on to the last question of this segment, and then we'll be moving on into the next bit of news.
Actually, unfortunately, that was the last one.
Really?
Yes.
We got through them that quickly.
It was that quick.
Good Lord. Well, with that, I thank all three of y'all so much for the support. I hope I've been able to address y'all's question fairly well. And also, I would like to say this just here real quick, just in case. If I do sound a little bit irritated tonight, I kind of am. It's been a little bit of a difficult day here, and also the news that we've gotten over the past 48 hours is incredibly aggravating and infuriating to cover, to say the least. So those two kind of things are kind of leading me to be a little bit more unhappy tonight about the situation than normal, but I hope that it doesn't impede our news coverage at all. And so with that, we're going to be moving on.
He kind of sounds like me in the nuclear video, that same kind of like sarcastic tone.
Oh man, he started with the flattery. And so with that, we're going to be moving on into the northeastern area of the front line, closest to the town of Oleksandrivka, where we saw the destruction of another Russian tank. This was done by the 72nd Mechanized Brigade.
Yes.
You see the tank
How do
in
you
the
find
distance?
it?
I believe it's right there. But let's check real quick. Yeah, it's right there. Oh, man. Look, it's a turret. Quick, everyone, make a wish. And also, what do y'all think about this turret toss? 1 out of 10. How good is the turret toss? Let's watch that one more time. Wow. That was a pretty explosive tank right there. What do you think, Matthew?
Let's see it one more time.
One more time. One more time for posterity's sake.
I think it blew it up.
I think it got it.
Maybe.
Maybe. We might have to fire another one down there just to make sure. But it looks like the Ukrainians took out another Russian tank. And we're also getting a lot of results here on the polls. Looks like some people are saying 7 out of 10, 10 out of 10, 11, 9. A lot of people are saying 9 to 10 out of 10. So it's good to know that the Ukrainians are still conducting perfect turret tosses on Russian tanks. Of course, huge credit to the Russians for providing the target, and huge credit to the Ukrainians for providing the fireworks. And so with that, we're going to be moving further down the front lines. And of course, before we move on, I would like to say that we have not seen a large amount of movement in this area of the front line in the Northeast. I believe this is most likely a delay, so that way the Ukrainian forces can resupply and get ready for whatever may come next. Because one thing that a lot of people may know or may not know, depending on how versed you are in military history or just the conducting of militaries have to build up a large amount of supplies to conduct offensives. And offensives grind down on supply caches and the overall amount of supply you have heavily. And so you actually have to have something of a bank account, a savings account in a way, to conduct any kind of offensive. And as you conduct that offensive, you're withdrawing more and more ammunition out of the savings account until it gets down to about like $1,000. You know, like you start off with 10,000, you get down to about 1,000, and then you have to stop your offensive so that way you can wait for your savings account to build back up to $10,000, and then you start all over again. That's pretty much how it works, but just replace the money with arms, ammunition, food, and all kinds of supplies, and that's how a military runs. And so right now, I believe that the Ukrainians are conducting a pause so that way they can build up their savings account of supplies again, and once they rebuild that, they will then begin the next offensive deep back into Ukrainian territory, hopefully to retake the remainder of what's left. Of course, I can't tell y'all exactly where they're going to be going, but there were about 7 to 9 people that were in a Discord call on our Discord server about, I believe, a week or two ago that heard what I'm assuming would be their next moves. So far, they have followed it quite well. We'll be seeing if they do that still, and of course, I beg of all of the people who were in that call not to disclose what I said would happen. Just wait until it does happen, so that way you can say, I was there, he did say it, so that way we have a general idea that that what the Ukrainians are doing is pretty sound, but of course not giving it away. And so with that, we're now going to be moving further down the front line and south of Svatove, where we saw that the Ukrainians have now gotten enough HIMARS ammunition, which I'm very happy about, to see that they're now using them against frontline targets. Here's an M142 hitting a D30. When you see the D30 down there on the ground, and we can now see that it's gone. So, some of y'all may know of the magician or the illusionist, Harry Houdini. And I believe he was the guy who coined the idea of disappearing in a puff of smoke. And I think that this D30 just pulled a Harry Houdini. What do you think, Matthew?
I think it did.
I think it did. It looks like it got everything. The ammunition, the artillery piece, the truck, everything down there is gone. And it's good to see. And also, it's a great thing to know that the Ukrainians now have enough HIMARS ammunition that they're not just using it as a bit of a strategic artillery piece to attack logistics, communications, and command structures. Now they're using them to attack frontline units directly, which tells me that I think that they're doing fairly well with HIMARS ammunition, but we still ought to make sure that they have a massive stockpile to work off of, so that way they can use them like this. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from this bit of frontline news south of Svatove, and we're now going to be moving all the way past Kreminna and into the area of Verkno-Kamyanka, Zolotarivka, and Bilowarivka. Both of these towns have very similar endings, and I think that is close to, like, Vil or Berg in English. But still, I don't really know a lot about that. Let me know if you can speak the Ukrainian language. Is Rivka a similar ending like Vil or Berg is in English town names? I would actually be interested to know that. Anyways, moving on down into the area of Bilowarivka, we saw that the drone-on-drone warfare has been conducted again in between the Ukrainians and the Russians, and it looks like the Ukrainians won again. Here's the video. We can see right there a Russian DJI. Oh, okay. All right. Copyrighted music. That's nice. But we can see here the Russian drone flying under the Ukrainian one. And now it's starting to rise in altitude again to try and hit the Ukrainian drone. And let's see if it succeeds. Nope. It failed. It's now falling to the ground. And the Ukrainian drone won again. And so with that, that's the end of the video, and it's very nice to see that the Russians keep on wasting DJI Mavic 2s on trying to take down Ukrainian drones, but the immovable object that the Ukrainian drones are simply remain unfazed and throw the weak, let me think about how to say that, the weak Russian drone to the ground. Like it should be. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on into the next clip of news from this area, where we can see that the 2nd Brigade then used their drones to drop bomblets on the Russians in this area. When you see the bomblet on its way, we can see a little bit of a Russian fortification down there, and it looks like the egg-shaped bomblet caused a small explosion near what appears to be an ammo crate. They've now dropped another one. This one exploded. Oh god, wait a minute, hang on, Matty, I just realized what this was. That is a dolly full of AP mines.
No way.
Yeah, wait a minute, no,
Perfect.
not AP, they're AT mines. So he
Who
dumps
puts them
them
in a dolly or a wheelbarrow?
He dumps them, and then they get back down here, and they're trying to load them onto the... Wait a minute. Oh, wait a minute. It looks like a Russian soldier has decided to take a nap. So they dumped all the AT mines out of the dolly, so that way they could carry this guy along. You know, it's great that they didn't hit the dolly, because then I don't think anyone would have been using it for obvious reasons. But I don't think they would also be using it because they would be gone, if you know what I mean. We can now see more artillery falling further downrange onto where they are, and I'm pretty certain that, fairly certain that they're not okay. With that, we're now going to be moving on out of the Verkno-Kamyanka and also Bielorivka area, but before we move on, let's give a summary of this entire area, starting from Bakhmut and going all the way north. In Bakhmut, the Russians have been conducting offensives for about 2 months now. Are they making any success? No. Will they make any success? No. Are they even competent? No. The Russians at this point are pretty much like a small child that's been given, you know, like a wooden hammer. That's about how effective they are, you know. I don't know if any of y'all have ever fought a small kid before, but anyways, moving on from that. I don't think they'll be doing quite well in that area, and they haven't been for the past 2 months. On up in the Bielorivka and Verkno-Kamyanka area, we've been seeing some activity, mostly drone-related, and it appears that the Ukrainians are inflicting a decent amount of casualties onto the Russian forces in this area. Moving even further on up into the northeast, we've seen that here, the Ukrainians, of course, are still conducting their activities, but it appears that they've made a pause for the meanwhile, so that way they can build up their supplies and ammunition, so that way they can continue to move on once they rebuild the supply caches. So for now, it seems like this area of the front line, all the way from Bakhmut all the way to the Russian border, is inactive at the moment, at least in terms of frontline movement, but the Ukrainians are still inflicting a decent amount of casualties onto Russian forces in this area. So we're now going to be moving on from the Bakhmut area and pretty much what we're going to be calling Luhansk now that the Ukrainians are back in Luhansk. And we're now going to be moving down to Donetsk to cover the Day 237 news, starting off with a little video from Radio Free Europe. And I found out something, Matthew. Radio Free Europe is actually funded by the U.S. government.
Wait, you didn't know that?
I did not. And they're also a nonprofit as well. So that makes all... And interesting enough, I always thought that this was not in public domain in a way, and we were using this for news reporting purposes, but it does fall in public domain and fair use. So that was really cool to know.
Whenever you click on a YouTube video from Radio Free Europe, it always has like a huge banner like right under the video that says, you know, funded by the U.S. on YouTube.
That's actually pretty interesting to hear. And also, I was looking at the live chat. A whole bunch of people are like, do you have any experience with that? Like, you know, what I was talking about earlier? No, I don't. And I hope y'all enjoyed the joke. And so with that, let's check out this Czech-provided Vampire MLRS. And for some reason, as the war goes on, the Ukrainians are provided with weapons that have cooler and cooler names. They started off with simple things like the Javelin, which is just a javelin. And now we're getting really weird and fun-sounding systems like the Vampire. And I'm sure that after a while, we're also going to be getting Master Chief and some other kind of cool-sounding weapon systems as well. But anyways, here is the Czech Vampire at work. Of course, courtesy to Radio Free Europe. You see them loading the MLRS, now they're driving it. We now see them setting up the Vampire.
I wonder why they call it the Vampire.
I wonder. Maybe because it's out to suck your blood.
Особисто на нашому напрямку ми тут більшості ведемо позиційні дії, обороняємось. От, наприклад, сидимо, чекаємо, приходять цифри, ми виїжджаємо, відпрацьовуємо. Так само після того бігом скручуємо машину, вертаємося назад в район очікування. Основна їхня задача – нанести масовий урон по області. От не точковий удар, а по області. Наприклад, зупинити колону противника, так само знищити живу силу противника.
I see them on the move again. Really cool cab, and also this guy's got some kind of a joystick. Interesting. That's really cool.
З вами весь час?
Да, з нами весь час.
Це як ваш талісман?
Так, це наш талісман.
Як звати?
Бармен.
Oh, look at a little puppy. Oh, that's cute. I like that. That's a cute puppy. What do you think, Matthew?
That is pretty cute. I don't know what kind of breed that is.
And I don't really know what it is either, but let us know what y'all think this is. Because it's a really cute puppy at that. Wait a minute, Matthew. Wait a minute. That's the vampire. That's the vampire.
Dog?
Yeah, the dog is the vampire. But still, it's super cute. All jokes aside, it's a very cute dog. I love it.
Противник дуже активізувався. Дійсно відчутно по їхній інтенсивності стрільби. Хоч вона і не прицільна, але все одно відчутно. Насправді дуже, так можна сказати, вони не прицільно стріляють, але все одно кількість снарядів їхня зменшилась, за що дякуємо Хіммерсам обов'язково. Ну, все одно вони намагаються просунутися невдало. Уже який день вони все намагаються і неодноразово відбивали їхній наступ. Вже почали рахувати, а ми знищили то, а ми знищили то. Тобто для особового складу це вже звична справа воювати. Вони вже настільки налаштовані вигнати їх звідси, що використовуються вже як гру. Тобто давайте ми вже їх швидше, давайте нам ціль, ми готові.
We now see them preparing the vampire for, I think, either launching or stowing. I can't really tell at the moment. And with that, that's the end of the video, but still an incredibly nice clip to see. And it's good to know that the Czechs have been providing the Ukrainians with their own incredibly interesting MLRS, the Vampire. With that, we're now going to be moving on further down the line towards the front line at Avdiivka, where we can see that another ATGM hit another Russian tank. It looks like the Russian tanks just aren't having a good time. Let's watch this. Also, let's not watch it with rock music. We can see the ATGM on its way, and looks like that BMP got it. The BMP now comes to a halt. The engine bay has now been flipped open, and it was a pretty solid hit, as we can see right there. And so with that, that's the end of that video. And once again, it looks like the Russians aren't really making any ground anywhere, and they're also not really having a good time using their forces on any part of the front line. I don't think the Russians will ever have luck again, and of course, I've said this many times, but the Russians have completely lost the initiative. They don't have the equipment, the arms, the ability, the training, nor the professional soldiers to continue on any kind of offensive whatsoever. We could see that it took all of their manpower and effort to take the towns of Severodonetsk and Lysychansk. And so with that in mind, and seeing that they've been losing massive amounts of ground over the past 2 months, there is absolutely no way, unless if they were to try just one last time, and it would be the remainder of the energy and efforts they have left, for them to try and conduct any kind of offensive on any part of the front line that would have some level of success. And it would most likely be countered immediately. If there was an offensive at this point, and I had to compare it to one from the past that everyone knows, I would compare it to the Battle of the Bulge. If the Russians tried anything, it would be very swift. It would probably take all of their remaining energy and effort to do it. Of course, that was not the last offensive that the Germans conducted in all of the Second World War, but it was really the last major try-hard offensive that the Germans ever conducted. So, going off of that, I feel like this one would be the same. The Russians would put in all of their effort. They would probably break through the line in one part. It would be temporary. The Ukrainians would most likely cut off that I guess you could say that bulge. That sounded wrong, but we're going to move on from that. And then those forces would most likely wither off, surrender, or be destroyed. One or the other. But I don't see the Russians ever getting the initiative again where they can actually do anything meaningful, to say the least. And so with that, we're now moving on to our last clip, where we can see some Russian captured tanks firing at the Russians. All the vehicles you'll see in this video are Ukrainian, but at one time, they were Russian. And now, they're not. So here's the video. We can see a BMP-3, a BTR-60 or a 70, and also a T-80 of a sort. We can see the BMP-3 firing. We see the BMP continuing to fire. All the other armored vehicles, they are just sitting by and watching. And with that, that's the end of the video. And we also got a little bit of a better look at this tank. And it looks to be a T-80 BV, most likely. Although these side flaps are kind of throwing me off a little. For some reason, I think it's a T-80 BVM. But at the same time, it really looks more like a T-80 BV. Nonetheless, all of these vehicles in this video were captured from the Russians by the Ukrainians and are now in Ukrainian hands. And I gotta say, quite nice. And also, if this was a letter being mailed from one person to another by the U.S. Postal Service, they would call this stuff return to sender. And so with that, we're going to be moving on into the next clip, which is actually out of the Donetsk area entirely and in the southern front. In fact, we're going to be covering the news inside of Russia, the two bits we have, which cover the same topic, and also all of our Kherson, Odessa, and Dnipro news, as well as the speech from Zelenskyy here in a second. But before we do, it is now time to go over the next amount of polls and the next question segment. So with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and we have two more polls to address. And the first one said, would Iran developing and arming nukes be a major concern for the West? It looks like 88% said yes, it would need to be stopped. 7% said not sure, and 5% said no, it would not be consequential. Now I think very clearly it would have to be stopped. Not only would it violate an agreement, which would not be good to let slide by, we can't have another country arming themselves with nukes, especially not Iran. But Enforcer, what do you think?
I think that nuclear proliferation should be limited as greatly as possible. That's why I'm not really a big fan of any nation that currently has nukes having them, and I'm not really a big fan of the idea of more countries getting more nukes. One thing that a lot of people always, this is something I've heard a lot as I was growing up, why not let everyone have nukes? Hell, put everyone on the same playing field. The problem with that is that we put everyone on the same playing field. Imagine a country like Turkey. You know, nothing against Turkey. If we have any Turkish viewers, hello. But one thing everyone can agree with is that the Turkish government is incredibly unstable. And depending on the whim of the nation, they can have a coup and the whole government gets overthrown. And to think that nuclear arms could be in the hands of a country like Turkey or Iran or even Afghanistan or I guess you could say Egypt, which is also a very questionable country, and that a government change could just occur and you could go from having a somewhat rational leader to a bat crap insane one, it doesn't really seem like it would make a lot of sense for nuclear proliferation to happen for any nation. It doesn't really make a lot of sense to me that we have not tried. Well, we have tried. That would actually be a wrong statement. We have tried heavily in the past to limit the amount of nuclear weapons greatly that the Russians and the United States have, but that really comes to no avail because both countries don't really trust each other, and I think we honestly have a pretty good reason to not trust the Russians. But moving on from that, to think of a country like Iran specifically getting a nuclear weapon, that is incredibly dangerous. Now, one thing we can do, though, one thing I will say, is that we do have the armament and the ability to shoot down these nuclear weapons before they get to us. That's pretty much the entire reason of the Patriot missile system, is to shoot down nuclear weapons from rogue states like North Korea, and Iran would most likely fall within that category, considering that their nuclear technology would be limited, it would probably be short in range, and so it can only be used regionally, at least for a while. Of course, North Korea eventually went from being a user of only regional nuclear weapons to now they have intercontinental ballistic missiles. And so it kind of depends. It kind of depends on how long the Iranians have them, but we do have the ability to shoot them down if they had them. I still think that we should stop them entirely from ever having the concept of even making one. And so with that, I hope that does address that poll fairly well, and we are on into the next one.
And Enforcer, I just saw somebody in the live chat say that it's possible Iran might already have nukes and they're just concealing it. And that's actually a good point. They might actually already have them because they have been caught before working on enriching uranium, I believe, if I'm correct, Enforcer.
And that is correct. And also another thing to back that fact up is that while UN inspectors travel worldwide and inspect and count the number of nuclear weapons that each country has to make sure that treaties are being followed, one thing that's always certain is that no one has an actual idea of how many nuclear weapons Israel has. Do they have 50? Do they have 75? 100? Do they have 20? No one really knows what number of nuclear weapons the Israelis have. We guess there's about 50. I don't know how UN inspectors or the United Nations in general doesn't really push the fact that we don't have official numbers on the nuclear weapons that Israel has. I'm not sure we have any standing treaties that limit them to having a certain number of nuclear weapons, but you would think that we would at least have a solid number on it, yet we don't. And so going off of that...
And I imagine it's probably pretty easy to conceal things from the inspectors, because the inspectors are relying on the country to lead them to the place where they claim to, have like these facilities and things like that. They could simply lie to the inspectors.
And that's true. And also considering that Israel has been able to conceal incredibly well their actual number of nuclear weapons, I would have to say that Iran could also be doing the same right now. They could have 2 of them. They could have 3 of them. Then again, one thing that is always done is that every nation in the world has tested their nuclear weapons in one form or another to see if they actually work. And so I guess that would be the ultimate indicator that they do have one, is if we ever see them conducting a nuclear test. If they did that, then we would obviously know that they now have the ability to make nuclear weapons and also field them in some kind of way. But we haven't seen that yet. They could be hiding them. I'm not entirely sure, but I feel like we should definitely forbid the idea of them ever having them. Also, a lot of people are saying that I forgot that Pakistan has them. Pakistan and India are also nuclear powers, which is something that a lot of people actually don't know. It's really interesting to me that a lot of people don't know that these two countries exchange fire across their borders constantly, nearly, killing each other's soldiers, and yet somehow they're both nuclear powers and they haven't obliterated each other yet. Of course, that's always a joke. If you ever get into nuclear weapons a lot, the joke is that the first nuclear war that would ever happen in the world would be in between Pakistan and India. Because if you don't know their history, I believe these two countries are the ones that would hate each other the most. Now, they've tried their best to get along, but they come to blows almost constantly over who owns Kashmir. If any of the trifecta in this area are the most hostile against each other, it's not the Chinese and the Indians, it's not the Pakistanis and the Indians, it's the Pakistanis and the Indians. I don't know why Kashmir, because if you look at Kashmir, it's in the Himalayas, so it's not really like it's a massive amount of arable farmland or anything like that. I believe some rivers and their sources start in Kashmir, although I believe the Chinese have dammed up some of those already on their side. I just don't understand how in the entire world they are always the ones closest to nuclear war, because a lot of people almost consider Pakistan and India one and the same, but once you get to it, they're culturally incredibly different and also ideologically incredibly different. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that poll incredibly well, and so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next poll says, do you think the USA is delivering enough equipment to Ukraine? This is surprisingly pretty evenly split. It looks like 43% said yes, but they could send it faster. 41% said no, we need to send more. And 15% said yes, they are sending plenty. Now, for me, I would have to say that I think we are delivering a good amount of equipment, but we could always send more. I think the debate right now is to send them, our newest equipment or the older equipment. And I'm not really sure what the considerations are behind that. Maybe preventing exposing our high-tech equipment to Russia in case they were to capture it. I'm not sure if that's a primary consideration or not, but I think we could send more personally. But Enforcer, what are your thoughts?
I would have to say, I think I would have to agree with the 41% that said we need to send more. It's not a question of speed. The United States, logistically, is the fastest moving military in the world. There's no one that can top the logistical capacity and the ability that the U.S. has. So it's not really a question of speed. It's more of a question of what we're sending. And I would have to go entirely with the idea we should send more stuff. There's a whole bunch of things that we have just not touched yet in terms of weaponry for the U.S. There's, of course, the aircraft. We have F-16s. Now, I will say this. I've been a big proponent of not sending the A-10 to Ukraine, but if we gave them an entire package, I would see the A-10 going over. I cannot see it going over on its own, though. On its own, it will die. They died a lot. Well, in the A-10 got shot down a lot, and a lot of pilots lost their lives operating them in the Gulf War compared to most coalition aircraft. But at the same time, that was with a whole package. And also, they are specialized as close air support aircraft. And so, the idea of them getting shot down is really, in a way, just accept it with the territory. Unlike other aircraft, those things are slow flying, they're low to the ground, and their entire job is to engage ground targets and destroy them. And of course, ground targets are going to be firing back to shoot them down. And so I've kind of had a little bit of a change of heart. I could see the A-10 being sent over, but we would have to send practically an entire combo package. The number.
Can you believe this, folks? Did you just actually hear him say that? He said send the A-10.
But there's a massive caveat. You would have to send it over as the entire like number 5 special with cheese. You couldn't just send it over as the burger itself. It would have to come with the fries, the drink, the sauces. You would have to send over all of the supporting aircraft that it would need to function properly. I don't think that it could do well on its own. That's one thing I will die on that hill. It won't do well on its own, but it would do well with an entire package. And we can send over an entire package if we wish. We now know that the Russians largely are bluffing with their lines in the sand. We've crossed those lines multiple times, very cautiously though, and we've seen that they never really respond with anything other than unsolicited attacks against civilians. And if we were to send these aircraft in and allow the Ukrainians to use them, the Russians would probably attack the civilians again, but the war would end a lot sooner due to the Ukrainians having a much more competent air arm. And so with that, I hope that addresses that question fairly well. I think that's a fairly good explanation of what I'm thinking weapon-wise could be sent over. Well, actually, there's a whole lot more. Of course, there's Abrams, there's Bradleys. I really think that a Bradley would do well in Ukraine, an M3A3 Bradley. And that's something that is kind of mixed the community. It's really because of reformists, and I'm not a big fan of reformists. We'll get into that probably in a video of my own, because while Matthew's making his videos, I was thinking about probably trying to see if we could have a dynamic blend, and let's just entertain this idea real quick. Instead of doing government cheese videos, I'm kind of seeing that the direction of this channel will be diplomacy and war. And so as long as the topic is covering war or some kind of geo-diplomacy, like what Matthew talked about with nuclear war, I think we will most likely stay in that genre from here forward, even if the war does end. So what Matthew and me were talking about is that we'll have a bit of a rotating schedule where he puts out a video, I put out a video, and then the next video is his. So we have a bit of a mix in between the two. So maybe y'all will enjoy that. Maybe not. But anyways, I think that the M3A3 Bradley would be a great addition. It has tows. Tows, if you don't know, are an incredibly competent system, specifically the kinds that this one could use, the TOW 2B, and also the 25mm Bushmaster could make great work of infantry. So it's an all-around pretty decent armored personnel carrier, or as they call them, an infantry fighting vehicle, which is a better description. And so with that, I hope that addresses that poll fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, now let's address the elephant in the room. Walter A. Lakota put in a $500 super chat. Very, very generous of you, Walter,
Good
and thank you so much. That is insane. So he says, Aloha, Enforcer and Enforcer Matt, and LSA from OG LSN Bosun on the USNS Loyal. I am back in Yokohama, Japan after the trip north in the Fishbowl, Bering Sea. It was a unique mission. If you can add me on Discord, I have a very short video of a 28 Ilyushin 2 38 May A/B flying by the ship on September 21st after Putin mobilization speech.
Good Lord, and I thank you so much for the massive amount of support, Walter. And also, it's great to hear that you're back from your voyage. Speaking of the North Sea, the Bering Sea, sorry, I was actually hearing that we are missing about 1 billion pounds of snow crab that's just gone missing. Like, the snow crab has now become an endangered, incredibly endangered species because of this. Did you hear that, Matthew?
Yeah, I think Russia took them.
Well, we don't really know who's taking them.
That's a joke. That's a joke. That's a joke. Don't get on me.
Well, I'm not getting on you. But we don't know.
I'm talking about the chat.
Oh, everyone's going to be like, what are you talking about? We think it's one of two culprits. Well, actually, I'll probably throw in a third. it's either the Russians or the Chinese, or it's the Japanese. A lot of people don't like to throw fingers at the Japanese, but if you know anything about the Japanese, they're one of the leading nations, along with the Chinese, that are into, I guess you could say, overfishing in a way. They're known for definning sharks, much like the Chinese, as well as also whale hunting. The Japanese do that a decent bit. If you've ever watched the show Whale Hunters, you'll know that one, that guy ended up being a criminal, and two, the Japanese were pretty big whalers, and that's a bit of an issue. So I'm going to throw it within the three. If it's the Japanese, we'll most likely say something like, hey, you know, those are our waters, those are the crabs, and there's some treaties protecting the amount of crabs there's supposed to be. And if it's the Russians or the Chinese, I really don't know what we're going to do in response. For the Russians, we could probably smack down even more sanctions, considering our current stance with them. With the Chinese, however, it's kind of a question as to what would be happening. Also, someone just said the North Koreans are an option. I would actually have to rule them out, because the North Koreans definitely do not have a seafaring fishing fleet that could travel that far and logistically supply themselves. They can hardly feed themselves inside of North Korea, and so having enough provisions for such a long voyage to, I guess you could say, fish that for that many snow crabs, I think it would be highly unlikely. So it'd have to be a country with a much larger fishing fleet, either the Chinese, the Japanese, or the Russians. But then again, I'm not entirely sure. Actually,
Although, in Forcer, I see some folks saying in the live chat it's just the warmer water, and they basically left because it's too warm.
Maybe. Also,
although, where did they go?
Also, Philip, you know, I wouldn't address this normally, but Philip, you're running on thin ice right now. Anyways, moving on from that, and because he kept I'm just gonna say this. He keeps on saying move on, and you know, I would normally have patience, but this is my show, bud. So if you don't like it, just go. You know, like, just, anyways, getting back to what we're talking about, and moving back to Walter. So, if your mission was pertaining to the crab, that would be interesting, and I would like to know if you have any information on what's happened to the crabs, because right now it seems a bit of like a mystery as to what has happened to the crabs. And I would actually like to know who has taken the crabs. Some people, of course, are saying warmer water, but I don't know, because it does seem kind of weird that 1 billion pounds of snow crab would go missing. Also, someone said
I see somebody saying they could just go deeper. If that's possible, that would be the most simplistic answer.
Maybe. Well, let's pull this up. Missing snow crabs.
I doubt the crabs died, Linda. That would be a doozy. I'm not sure if they would like float to the surface if they died or what.
Let's see. The state of Alaska has canceled the snow crab harvest for the first time due to a dramatic 90% decline in population. That's just unbelievable.
I wonder if that means Deadliest Catch is canceled.
It probably means so. I mean, because there's nothing for them to catch. You know, they can't. There's no season for snow crabs this year. Let's see. It's not known exactly why the crabs are disappearing so quickly, but warming waters could be to blame. But 90% of them in a year? Like, that's incredibly high. I mean, like, that's 9 out of every 10. So, thanks. I don't know. Let's see. There were 8 billion scaling along the floor. That number fell to just 1 billion. Okay, so it appears that may have happened over a couple of years. But not exactly sure. I don't know.
Interesting.
I don't know. I really don't know what's happened to the crabs, honestly. It may seem that it may be some kind of a climate change. The water is warming in the area, from what I've been told. It could be anything. I would just really like to know and get to the bottom of that. But with that, it's still interesting. I would like to know the answer to that. If you got anything to share, I would love to hear it. And also, if you add me, I have a video of a 28 Illusion IL-38. That would be cool to see. I wonder, I would love to see the video, because if it flew really close to your ship, or if it was Russian, that would be pretty interesting as well. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the amazing amount of support, Walter. Of course, it helps out this channel massively, and it helps us to keep this thing rolling. And without viewers like you, it wouldn't be possible, especially with that kind of support. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for helping this channel to keep running, and I hope we were able to address the comment fairly well. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you so much once again for the support.
And yes, thank you very much, Walter, so much for that very generous support. And moving on to our next super chat, we have a $100 donation from Kitty, who says, supporting the Enforcer and Ukraine.
And thank you so much for the support. It helps us out a massive amount, Can Kitty. And I got to thank you so much for the massive support. I mean, you didn't throw in a lot to comment, but of course, I thank you all so much. It means a lot to me that a lot of people enjoy this channel and want to keep going, and so we're going to keep on trying to cover this news the best we can, and of course, thanks to y'all's support, we'll be able to keep it going for quite a long while until this war ends. And so with that, thank you so much once again, and with that, we are on to the final question of this segment, and then we'll be moving on into the next segment, and the last segment of news for the night.
All right, and the final one goes to Mark Slava Ukraine, who puts in a $60 donation and says, Enforcer, are you aware that Ukraine has recognized, 1, Japan's claim to the Kuril Islands, number 2, Dagestan and Chechnya as an independent but occupied countries?
Can you read that one again real quick?
Mark says, Enforcer, are you aware that Ukraine has recognized, 1, Japan's claim to the Kuril Islands, and number 2, Dagestan and Chechnya as independent but occupied countries?
And for some reason, I keep on missing the country that's done that. Which country has done that?
Japan's claim to the Kuril Islands, and Ukraine has recognized that, and also Dagestan and Chechnya are independent.
Okay, I thought the U.S. had done that. I was like, yikes! I was like, that is incredibly extreme. I was like, I'll have to pull that up real quick. I have heard about that, actually. I've heard that, in fact, the Ukrainians have urged the Japanese to retake the Kuril Islands, which is this little stretch of islands right north of Japan that goes towards the... I forgot the name of this peninsula. Unfortunately, I can't name it right now. But also another thing that they own, which I believe that they should try and lay claim to, is the Sakhalin Island. Before World War II, they owned half of the Sakhalin Island. Now they own none of it. It's all owned by the Russian Federation. And officially, the war never ended in between Japan and the Soviet Union, now the Russian Federation, because they never signed a peace treaty. So officially, that war is still going on in between them, which is really bizarre when you think about it, to think that they've never really gone to war. Still, there has been an occasional instance where you could say that the war went on, like the Japan Airlines 747 that was shot down over the Sakhalin Islands because the Russians said it was a spy plane, although it obviously wasn't. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support. Interesting to hear, and I'm glad that Ukraine is out there and stirring the pot like the Russians are diplomatically in their own way, and in a pretty good way as well. It's good to know that they're pretty much asserting the decent things to do, like making sure that Dagestan or Dagestan and Chechnya have their own sovereignty. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support, BC Scamming, and thank you so much for sharing that with us as well. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on into our final segment of news for the night, starting out at Isk, which is in a very unknown place in Russia, just west of Rostov-on-Don, and beyond another town called Azov, which the Ukrainians also have one of their own, which I don't think I'll be able to find, but maybe someday I will. We saw a very interesting sight. And I'll show you the video real quick, and then I'll show you all the picture. When you see the town of Isk here late at night, when you see a bit of a little dot skirting across the skyline, and now when you see it starting to go lower to the ground and hitting a building and exploding. What we just witnessed was a fully loaded Su-34 crashing and ramming straight into a residential building. It's killed dozens of Russians, but one thing that you can always be assured of is that the Russian military will always make themselves look as bad as they can, even in situations like these. So let's observe this picture real quick. Would you look at that? It's the pilot.
No way.
Yeah, the pilot ejected and allowed the Su-34 to fly headlong into a building full of people and kill them. You can't really add a lot of comment to that. That picture speaks bounds about the Russian military and what real Russian soldiers and airmen and pilots think. They don't care about anyone rather than themselves. If you heard this story here in the United States, it would always go something like this. An F-16 had engine trouble while on an exercise over Cincinnati, Ohio. The pilot gave his life to ensure that the aircraft did not run into the apartment building right in front of its flight path, and he guided it into a park where it crashed, killing nobody but him. And even though he had never served a day in his life in a war or ever gone on tour, he would be hailed as a hero for sacrificing himself to save the civilians in front of him. But this Russian pilot, on the other hand, he's decided that his life is far more important than the dozens of people that are inside this apartment building, and so he ejected out of the jet and allowed it to crash right into it, killing everyone in his path. And that is, in a way, a tragedy, and in a way it once again shows you how messed up the Russians are on a simple level. And also someone said there should be 2 parachutes, and that is correct. The Su-34 does have 2 pilots, a pilot and a co-pilot. The second pilot may be off screen, but the fact that just one of them ejected instead of trying to guide the aircraft away from the apartment building, it says a lot about the Russian Air Force and the kind of pilots that are there. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from that incredibly shocking and sickening news to see. Not only are the Russians cowards in attacking Ukrainian citizens, they're cowards in indirectly attacking their own in accidents. Moving on out of the town of Isk and further down the front lines in the south and around Vasilivka, we can see that a Russian drone got obliterated, and this was filmed from another Russian drone. Here's the video, and it's pretty crazy to see. Also, we're going to mute that, and we're going to rewind it real quick, so that way you can see this in its entirety. We can see the Russian drone on its way. Oh! It's gone. Huh. Let's watch that again, Matthew. Oh, it got turned into confetti.
Let's see that one more time. I'm trying to figure out what I saw to the left, like right before it hit. It was like some kind of, I can't even tell what that is.
Probably some kind of a. Huh,
what is
that's a good point. What is that?
Is that, I hate to say it, but is that CGI?
I don't really know.
That doesn't look legitimate.
I don't really know what that is. But I can say one thing that's legitimate is that this drone got obliterated. It got hit by some kind of a Stinger or an Igla. It slammed dead into the drone, exploding and making the thing turn into confetti.
You know, it looked like a UFO over there to the left.
It kind of did. And so that's the end of that video. And it's nice to see that the Ukrainians are using their manpads to turn Russian drones into confetti. And so with that, we're now going to be moving up into Dnipro, where we also saw another missile get shot down in broad daylight. This is probably the best video I've ever seen of a low-flying Russian cruise missile being destroyed by Ukrainian air defense forces. When you see the missile flying over, flying into the distance.
Yeah.
And I gotta say, I think that missile won't hit anything. It got demilitarized. Right there. The glowing white orb. It looks like the rising sun.
Yeah.
And so with that, that's the end of the video. And it's nice to see that this little cruise missile won't really be doing anything that it was intended to do. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from the Dnipro news and down on into Kherson. Starting off in the center of the Kherson Peninsula. Of course, due to operational security reasons, none of these markers are accurate. And so starting off with the first one, we can see a Russian vehicle get destroyed. Here we can see the shed that these vehicles are inside of. And now we can see the open air that these vehicles will burn in. Now you can see it being hit again. And now we can see another Russian vehicle being hit and turning into a large fireball. Very nice to see. And it's good to know that the Ukrainians are continuing to destroy Russians in the Kherson area. Moving on into the next clip of news near the town of Tveriske, we saw a little bit of bombletting happening. Of course, this marker is not entirely accurate, but hopefully it is because we're showing Russians. So here's the video. You see the Ukrainian drone getting on top of the Russian supply truck. We can see the O slightly visible in the thermal camera. It's gone. And it looks like it's flattened the countryside, and it did. And there's the remainder of the truck, and it did flatten the local countryside. We now see the truck from another angle. And that's the end of the video, and a really cool outro. Now that's a cool outro, Matthew. I don't know about you, but that's a sick one.
That was pretty cool, I must say.
And so with that, that's the end of that video. And once again, nice to see that the Ukrainians have got some sick intros and also some pretty good skills at taking out Russian supply trucks still. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on to the town of Vitrove, where we saw a little bit of demining occurring, this time from a Ukrainian UR-77. We haven't seen the Ukrainians use these things like the Russians have. They use them for their intended purpose, which is demining. And so let's watch this.
Go, вперед, вперед!
And so, this area is now clear of mines.
Ебать.
We can now see the vehicles moving forward, the UR-77 leading the way, and I'd have to say that area is most likely clear of mines, and it's good to see that the Ukrainians, wherever that was, are advancing in the Kherson area. Moving on to today's news, in day 238, we saw another HIMARS firing off its allotment of missiles here in the Kherson region. Actually, we saw two of them, but here's the video. Oh, that's got music. When we see the HIMARS launching their missiles, and even more right there. You see these missiles continuing to be fired. And it's nice to see that the Ukrainians are firing off so many HIMARS missiles and hopefully hitting so many targets further downrange. Moving on into our last clip of news from the Kherson area, we also saw that Ukrainian soldiers were advancing in Kherson in an unknown location. We know it was in Kherson, but we don't know exactly where. Here's the video. See the BTR moving forward.
Yeah, boy!
Yes, sir! 100, laughing face. Also, there's music. I just heard that, so we're going to have to mute it. When we see the BTR continuing to fire, and with that, that's the end of the video, and it's good to see that the Ukrainians are continuing to advance in the Kherson area, and hopefully will be retaking the area quite soon. Of course, I can't give any exact information on the area due to the Ukrainians' request for immediate blackout, so with that, all I can say is that the Ukrainians are doing quite well. Moving on into Odessa, however, we did see that another Shahed attack occurred on Odessa today, just a few hours ago. And so here's the video of the Russians attacking Odessa once more with a Shahed. We hear the Ukrainian police, of course, attempting to shoot down the drone as best they can. And I actually believe, now that I saw that warehouse get hit, I believe that's an old video of the first time that Shaheds were used, and they were used in Odessa. So take that with a grain of salt. I think that may have been an older video that was just marked as today. And so with that, we have now covered all of the news from around the world, most specifically Ukraine, and just two in Russia. And so now it's time to move all the way north into Kyiv to cover the speech from President Zelenskyy here on day 238 of the war. And so, here's the speech from President Volodymyr Zelenskyy.
Українці, українки, сьогодні продовжилась битва за нормальне життя. Українці, українки, сьогодні продовжилась битва за нормальне життя для наших людей. Були нові російські атаки проти нашої енергосистеми. Частину дронів і ракет вдалося збити. Знову дякую за це нашим зенітникам, нашим повітряним силам, зокрема 138-й Дніпровській зенітній ракетній бригаді, за збиття 4 калібрів. Є хороші результати і у інших наших захисників неба. Відзначу сьогодні ще Херсонську зенітно-ракетну бригаду за збиття російського штурмовика Су-25. Дякую партнерам усім, хто допомагає нам з протиповітряною, протиракетною обороною. Наприклад, дуже добре показала себе німецька Айріс-Т. Це справді ефективна система. Працюємо з партнерами, щоб дати ще більше захисту українському небу. Протягом доби терористичних ударів зазнали понад 10 українських регіонів: Житомирщина і Київщина, Сумщина, Дніпро і Кривий Ріг, Харківщина і Запоріжжя, Миколаїв та інші міста Південної України, Донбас. Всюди, де це можливо, намагаємось прискорити відновлювальні роботи. Але зараз, так само, як і в попередні дні, загальна ситуація ще потребує дуже свідомого споживання електрики і обмеження використання у пікові години техніки, що споживає багато енергії. Чим більше свідомим є наше побутове споживання електрики з 17 по 23 години, тим більш стабільною буде наша енергосистема. Кожен і кожна, хто дотримується цього простого правила, для пікових годин допомагає всій країні. Будь ласка, пояснюйте це родичам, друзям, сусідам, щоб спрямувати наше національне єднання до спільного і дуже потрібного результату. Сьогодні у мене було багато нарад і комунікацій щодо відновлення інфраструктури. Завтра запланована ще одна загальна нарада по ситуації в енергетиці. Опрацьовуємо усі можливі сценарії. І, звичайно, все це поєднується з нашими заходами для посилення оборони проти дронів. Маємо пам'ятати, що сам факт звернення Росії по таку допомогу до Ірану є визнанням Кремлем свого військово-політичного банкрутства. Десятиліттями вони витрачали мільярди доларів на свій ВПК, а у підсумку пішли на поклон в Тегеран, щоб отримати доволі прості дрони і ракети. Стратегічно це їм все одно нічим не допоможе, лише додатково доводить світу, що Росія на траєкторії свого програшу і намагається втягнути у свої спільники в терорі ще когось. Обов'язково забезпечимо відповідну міжнародну реакцію на це. Але зараз на тактичному рівні за рахунок іранських дронів у терористів ще можуть виникати певні надії, якісь там розрахунки, нові ілюзії. Все це розвалиться, як і попередні їхні розрахунки. 237 днів цієї війни доводять, що ми здатні знайти відповідь на будь-які загрози, якщо діємо разом всі українці, всі народи вільного світу. Маємо сьогодні важливе рішення від Естонії. Її парламент визнав Росію державою-спонсором тероризму. І це ще один європейський крок до того, щоб фактична реальність російського терору, європейське офіційне ставлення до Росії повністю співпадали. Терор має отримати всі види реакції на полі бою, санкційну і юридичну. Дякую за це нашим естонським друзям. Ми продовжимо роботу на всіх рівнях, щоб і інші країни ухвалювали аналогічні рішення. Провів нараду щодо опрацювання в структурах ООН проєкту нашої резолюції по створенню компенсаційного механізму, який забезпечить відшкодування за рахунок російських активів всієї шкоди за цю війну. Поступово рухаємось і за цим напрямком. Держава-терорист неминуче заплатить за все, що наробила. Сьогодні відбулось чергове розширення нашої платформи United24. Ця державна фандрайзингова платформа зібрала вже більше 200 мільйонів доларів від людей з десятків країн. Олександр Усик став новим амбасадором United24. А щойно говорив з ним я і подякував йому за готовність працювати для України. Олександр зосередиться на проєктах, присвячених відбудові нашої країни, зокрема у Київській області. Просто нагадаю, що амбасадорами разом з Усиком вже є Андрій Шевченко, Еліна Світоліна, Imagine Dragons, креативний директор Balenciaga Демна, Лєв Шрайбер, Барбара Стрейзенд і Марк Гемел. Сьогодні ж на рахунки України надійшли 2 мільярди євро макрофінансової допомоги від Євросоюзу. Це важливо для нас, для соціальної підтримки наших людей. Ми дуже вдячні, очікуємо інші транші за цим пакетом обсягом в 9 мільярдів євро загалом. Я дякую усім друзям України, дякую кожному і кожній, хто воює і працює заради нашої перемоги. Що б не планував ворог і що б не робив, наша перспектива очевидна. Україна захистить себе. Слава Україні!
And with that, that's the end of the speech from President Zelenskyy here on day 238 of the war in Ukraine. And that, of course, wraps up our news segment for the night. If you have enjoyed, please make sure to hit the subscribe button. We run this stream every single day of the week at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, except for Mondays. We take that day off. And we're going to make sure to keep covering this war until the very end, until the last day, regardless of what has to be done, regardless of what we have to do behind the scenes. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for everyone's support. And we're now going to be moving into the question segment to answer all the questions that have to be answered, of course, and also the polls as well. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, folks. So time for the final segment of the night. And of course, we have 2 more polls to address. And the first one said, where do you think, or excuse me, it meant to say, what do you think happened to the snow crabs? But it said, where do you think happened to the snow crabs? So that was a little typo. It looks like 37% said they left because of warm waters. 34% said commercial overfishing. 17% said they went to deeper sea. 12% said they were stolen by a foreign country. Now, I'm not even going to take a guess. I have no clue. So, Enforcer, what do you think?
First, I would have to say, I really have no idea either. That's why I was kind of like not really making a clear judgment earlier, because I really don't know what in the world would have happened to the snow crabs. A lot of people seem to be under the impression that the snow crabs are either dying or moving. And 90% of a population of an animal dying in a short amount of time isn't unheard of. It did happen to the Tasmanian devil back in the, I believe, early 2000s or the late 90s, which is something a lot of people don't know. 90% of their population died off in 2 years because of a very aggressive and passable cancer. The cancer could be passed from animal to animal by bite, which is kind of crazy. But anyways, moving on from that, I don't really know. I'm actually going to have to not answer that one, but the results are pretty interesting. It seems like most people are siding with the idea that it was not a foreign country that overfished the snow crabs. It was, in fact, some kind of a environmental force that moved the crabs or killed them. And so with that, I hope that does address the poll fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
All right. And the next poll said, at this point, how are you feeling about Ukraine's outlook on winning/ending the war? It looks like 60% said I am solidified they will win, 35% said I am optimistic but reserved, 4% said I am pessimistic but hopeful, and 1% said I am solidified they will lose. Now for me, I'm going to fall within the 35% camp that said I'm optimistic but reserved, and here's why. When people get too confident that they're going to win something, that starts losing support internationally, and also it stops motivating people to fight as hard as they possibly could. So I'm going to say that I'm optimistic, but we should not let our guard down yet, and we should also keep sending support and equipment over to Ukraine. But Enforcer, what do you think?
I would have to say, I would actually have to agree with the 60% that I'm solidified that they will win. And of course, I know, Matthew, you're more of a reserved person. I believe that is a more sensible option to go with a reserved option, because there is always a chance for change. But at this point, I would have to say that they will win. It's just a matter of how much longer can the Russians hang on. It's not really a question like at the beginning of the war, a lot of people thought, with how long can the Ukrainians keep going. So with that in mind, I would have to say it certainly will win. I'm pretty sure they'll retake most of the ground that they've lost, that we still see that the Russians are occupying. And it's only a matter of how much longer can the Russian government and the Russian economy continue to function without entirely collapsing and then the war ending because of that. I'm not exactly sure how long that will be, but I hope that does address the poll fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and that was our last poll. So we're now moving on to our super chats once again. And up first, we have a $50 donation from BC Skyman, who does not leave a comment. But BC is a channel legend. He's been around forever, and he will forever be known as a channel legend. So, BC, thank you very much for the support. And Enforcer, would you like to add a few words?
Yes, I would. I thank you so much for the support, BC Skyman. You have been around, like Matthew said, forever. Ever since day 4, I remember you being here, and I think even longer than that, like day 3 or day 2. And I thank you so much for the support and being here and helping this channel to keep running. You, of course, are more invested than most people, having family that lives in Ukraine, and of course your wife being Ukrainian in this war. And I'm glad to know that this channel and this news means enough to you that you would support us to help this to keep going. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support, and I hope that does address the super chat fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and moving on to our next one, we have a $30 super chat from Blue Flam 777, who says, Zelenskyy, hey Volodya, do you want to hear a joke? Putin said, sure. Zelenskyy said, Ukraine, Putin, I don't get it. Zelenskyy said, you will never get it. Slav Ukraine.
That's a pretty good one. And I thank you for the support. And that was actually a pretty good joke. Pretty solid punchline. I'm glad it had a punchline. Because, of course, if you've ever watched Monty Python, they have punchline police. And if you didn't have a punchline, I would have called them out. But I do thank you so much for the support. That was a really good joke. What do you think about it, Matthew?
I'm still trying to run it through my head to get it, to be totally honest.
You know, like Putin will never get Ukraine. So that's like the punchline of the joke.
Oh, okay. He said Ukraine, Putin, I don't get it. You will never get it. Oh, okay, I got you. Good one, Blue Flam. It took me a minute. It went over my head.
Yeah, it's a pretty solid one, I gotta say. I liked it a lot. And it looks like a lot of people like that one too. A lot of LOLs coming out. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support, Blue Flame 777, and thank you for helping this channel to keep on running, and of course supporting us so that we can keep going. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you so much once again for the support.
All right, and up next, we have a $25 super chat from White Lightning 777, who says, if Putin tries to draft the women, would that trigger a Ukrainian maiden type of revolution, but within Moscow?
I'm not entirely sure if it would. It didn't do that in the Second World War when the Russians called up women for service then, and I don't think it would do that now. Well, no, I'd have to change that. If they did that now, considering that would probably be a step even after general mobilization, that would definitely lead to the Russian government's collapse. If they hadn't already collapsed at that point, they would be collapsing then. Because to get to that point, you would have to have already called up a general mobilization, which is something they said they wouldn't do at the beginning of the war. It would cause a lot of people to go into riot. A lot of people in the military would be dissenting against the government and also the military itself. And so there'd be a massive amount of support to already overthrow the government. If they start calling up women too, well, then that's about the last straw. And so with that, I think that would be the tipping point. So I hope that answers the question fairly well. And thank you so much once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $50 super chat from Devin Gray, who says, from Dury Ridge, Free State Armory, LLC, Slava Ukraine.
And thank you so much for the support in Dury Ridge.
Free State Armory.
Free State Armory. Let's take a look at this. Palmetto?
Dury Ridge. You have it spelled right.
Hang on one second. I'm gonna pull this up on another tab real quick. I can't find any Google images. I find nail polish. But I can't find. Wait, hang on. Let's see. Man, I can't find them on Google. I would pull you up because it sounds like you're a gun store, and I'm a huge fan of gun stores, just going in and browsing at least. But with that, I thank you so much once again for the support, Devin Gray. And of course, it's great to have you here. And if you are in an armory, like some kind of a gun store or something, let me know, because I would probably, if it's nearby, like to come there and take a look. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for helping this channel to keep on rolling and to keep running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $23 super chat from Susan, and I'm going to butcher it, but here we go. Quirarez. It's a Spanish last name, and I can't say it right, but Susan, please tell me how to pronounce it in the live chat. It's a little bit tricky for me. I'm not good with last names, but thank you so much for the support. And Enforcer, would you like to add a few words yourself?
Yes, I would. I would like to thank you so much as well, Susie, for the support. It helps out this channel greatly. And you didn't throw in a comment, but of course, it means a lot to us, and it helps us to keep this thing running. And of course, it really helps us out a lot, considering that we may be having major changes in the background. I don't know if that will be happening, but we'll just have to see. So I thank you so much once again, and with that, we are on to the next one. But thank you so much for helping us to keep this thing rolling.
And next up, we have a $20 super chat from Jose Diaz, who says, greetings from Arecibo, Puerto Rico, Enforcer and Enforcer Matt and LSA. Keep up your great job, and Gloria, Ukrainia.
And I thank you so much for the support, Jose Diaz. Of course, Puerto Rico is standing behind the Enforcer. Apparently the whole of Puerto Rico, and that's kind of wild. Of course, we've been there before on Google Maps, and it looks a lot like the normal United States, which is shocking, because in the United States, for some reason, a lot of people act like it doesn't, but it looks just like it. I mean, it's got the same interchanges, the same kinds of highways, and, well, not interstate. I don't think it has an interstate, but it has highways, and they're very similar looking. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support, and it's good to know that Puerto Rico is still with the Enforcer, and I thank you so much for still being with us as well. You are an old guard member of the Lee Spring Army, and of course, it is a huge honor and a privilege to have so many of y'all still here with us, still covering this war. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well, and with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
All right, and up next, we have a $20 super chat from Midwest Vikinger, who says, I believe victory will be complete by midsummer 2023 and Ukraine fully restoring herself. Slava LSA, love from the Ulfhidnar Battalion, and as always, Slava Ukraine.
And thank you so much for the support. And I love how people are coming up with different kinds of battalions and things like that in the Lee Spring Army. We got all kinds of them now that I've heard. And it's really cool to know that a lot of people are coming up with ones, because I think that's really cool. Also, to address that comment, I think I would have to largely agree with that. I think that the farthest this war could go on at this point would most likely be the late summer, or it will end as early as late spring. I think it will either be one or the other. I can't see this war going on for much longer than that, because the Russian economy and also the Russian military, along with the government, can't survive that much longer. We already know that they've lost a majority of their operational vehicles and equipment that they had pre-war. And so they're pretty much on their second wind right now. And so with that, I hope that addresses the comment fairly well. And I thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again.
And next up, we have a $20 super chat from BL Parak, who says, I wrote senators and congressmen today. More support for Ukraine. Donated to the Ukrainian drone army.
And also, I thank you for the support, and that is really cool to hear. And of course, it's always great to call up your representatives, wherever you live in the world. I don't know if it works the same in some countries, but in the United Kingdom, it may be worth calling up your member of parliament in discussing what you think with them, or at least their secretaries. Or in the United States, you can call up your representative, your state representative, or your senator, because they will be the ones who will be partitioning the funds and support for Ukraine. I would say call up your state representatives, like your governor, but governors and also state legislators don't really have the same budgeting power that the federal government has, especially when it pertains to foreign nations. And so it's much more potent to address them instead. But with that, I thank you so much for the support. It's good to hear that you are still supporting Ukraine, and it's good to know that we still have people out there also contacting our representatives as well, to show them that we still have people, a lot of people here in America, that support Ukraine and want to see them succeed. And so with that, I hope that does address the comment fairly well, and thank you so much once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
All right, and next up, we have a super chat from Avarwi Mandubratis, who puts in a $20 donation and says, how effective might World War II era AKAA weapons be around Ukrainian cities against Iranian and Russian drones? Must be more effective than police rifles.
They could be somewhat effective. I'm trying to think about that. I think that they would probably be slightly effective, but then again, you got to think, well, World War II weapon, the fuse on that thing is probably not going to be that great, and these drones are incredibly small, and so you probably have to have a massive amount of these anti-air guns around a city to ever try and actually shoot one down. It will probably expend a massive amount of ammunition, and it could probably only be kept up for a short amount of time before that ammunition was just completely exhausted. So I would have to say it could be effective for a while. You would have to have a massive amount of around a particular city and probably a load of ammunition to keep them running. But then again, that's just my opinion. I could be wrong. They could be effective, but I'm not really sure. One thing I was thinking that probably would be effective is to make a kind of like a anti-drone drone. Like the Shahed has an explosive tipped head on it. Just create a smaller, faster, and more maneuverable drone that also has an explosive tipped head on it that could ram into the Shahed and then destroy it. I feel like that would be a more surefire way. Maybe try and come up with some kind of simple system where you can lock the camera, kind of like a Maverick missile. You can lock the camera onto an image of that drone that it took, and it flies itself towards the drone without really a lot of guidance involved. I think that would be probably the easiest fix to the problem, probably the most economical as well. But then again, that's just me, and I don't know everything, but I still think it's a pretty interesting idea. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
All right, and up next, we have a $20 super chat from BC Skyman, who says, sponsoring a live chat question. Thank you guys for your perseverance, and Slava Ukraine.
And thank you so much for your support, and I thank you so much for enjoying this channel. I'm sorry that if I have been a little short tonight. But it's been a day, to say the least. The news has been part of it. A lot of stuff in the background has been second to it. So I thank you so much for enjoying it, and enjoying that we stick with it. Of course, I try and make sure that my own things that go on in the background never really try and flow over into the stream, but I think tonight's about one of the first times that it ever has. Sorry once again for that, but we will make sure to answer a live chat in your honor. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and that live chat question goes to Douglas Nyquist, who says, Enforcer, what do you know about the rebuilding of Ukraine? Meaning, have they already started on repairs to the damaged buildings?
They have. We don't know how many buildings they have repaired or fixed yet, but it does seem to be a pretty extensive amount. So far, we've seen some videos and pictures of some buildings being redone and remade, sometimes a little bit better looking than before, and sometimes a little bit worse looking than before as well. But still, they are rebuilding. Rebuilding is a constant process, and hopefully they'll be able to rebuild all of this mostly before the end of the war or after the end of the war. And so with that, I hope that does address the question fairly well, and I thank you so much once again for the support, and I hope that does answer the question fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
All right, and up next, Kaltenberg puts in two $20 super chats. And Kaltenberg, before we get to the punchline, thank you very much for the support. We do appreciate it. The first one says, has everybody heard? And Enforcer, have you heard?
I do hear. I have heard.
Well, don't you know about the bird? Well, everybody knows that the bird is the word. Don't you know the bird? The bird is the word. Everybody's talking about the bird.
Nani? Oh, man. Oh, good Lord. I don't even know where to go with that. Because, we try and sing it, that we could be copyrighted. I don't really know. Also, I think I may have overdosed on caffeine tonight, Matthew, because I am just jittery over here. And I think that's also adding to some of it. But with that, I thank you so much for the joke. I do know, I think everybody has heard about the bird. The bird is the word. Wait a minute, hang on. Let me do this in a more natural way. Everybody knows that the bird is the word. All right, and with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for the support.
All right, and just a quick reminder that if you have put a super chat in, we will be getting to it momentarily. I see somebody chomping at the bits to get to their super chat. Don't worry, it'll be coming up very soon. And let's see here. Spreadsheet locked up on me in the wrong moment. All right, so our next one is from William Allen, who puts in a $20 donation and says, sorry, I can't give more. The War Department has me remodeling the kitchen.
Oh,
man.
No.
William. Those remodeling jobs are expensive these days, so I understand that.
Yeah, it's totally fine, William. And of course, if it ever becomes too much to remodel the kitchen, don't worry about supporting the channel. We'll be fine. Make sure to take care of the kitchen first. But the War Department can sometimes be incredibly taxing. I myself have fully integrated control of the War Department to myself only. I have the sole responsibility of the conducting of that particular War Department, but I do completely understand that the War Department does take priority, and I hope that that kitchen gets fixed incredibly soon. I guess you could call that the special kitchen operation. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support, and I hope we addressed that comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
All right. And up next, we have a $20 super chat from Lewis Brown, who says, Enforcer Matt, do a video on Project Ajax. And what in the world might that be?
Well, Project Ajax is when you put a certain kind of washing agent inside of a, whatever it is. Anyways, we can see here, it's
An Iranian coup.
Iranian coup d'etat. I like how it's coup d'etat, but for some reason, because it's French, it's coup d'etat. I don't understand how French works. It's a neat-looking language. It sounds very interesting, but I just don't understand the spelling conventions. Maybe one day I'll get around to that, though.
And I see the little old CIA lurking down there bottom around government and insurgents section. Do you see that?
Oh? What's this?
I bet that would be fascinating to learn about.
This probably would be fascinating. I don't know, Matthew. We might come up with a segregation in between what kind of videos we do. That this might be a video that would be covered by... I don't know, Matthew, because you could still do this one since this was addressed to you. This might be a video that would be covered by me, or this could be one that's covered by Matthew. I don't know. We might actually end up covering the same videos, just with different ways of covering it, maybe different styles on the same channel, which I think will add a lot of variety. But I don't really know. What do you think, Matthew?
So I'll be honest, folks, the really deep, like this one would be deep in my opinion, or at least for me it would. This one would probably be better for the Enforcer to handle. But I wouldn't mind giving it a shot, but he'd probably be able to like find all the nuances a little quicker than me. But Enforcer, what do you think?
One thing that Matthew and me do know is one thing I gotta say though, because there are strengths and weaknesses to both of us. Matthew is pretty good with comedy and memes, and I gotta say, Matthew did an incredibly good job with that video. I loved the memes that he put into it. I thought they were incredibly good. We did have to switch one out though near the very end, right at the end of the video. We actually had to switch it out from Donald Duck to the rat, and I don't know what the name of the rat, Jerry, I think it is. We had to switch it out. Yeah, we had to switch that one out for copyright reasons, but the joke really kept its main material. Ito's really good at that, and I thought it was a very fun little video. It was just silly, and I liked it. One thing that I can do, but honestly I don't think I do it as well as him, is the jokes. I think Matthew's better at the jokes, but one thing I can do is get into the detail, and that's one thing that I think, and I'm not going to talk for you, Matthew, I think that's one thing that Matthew doesn't like doing much, is getting into massive amounts of historical detail. He likes to make...
Although I say that, but the next video is going to be a little bit more detailed by actually a lot than the first one. So I guess it just comes down to, like, I'm not well versed in Iran's history, so to me it'd be all new information, but I am more familiar with Russia's history and also our own. So I know a little bit more about that, so I can piece it together a little quicker. But I'd be like totally in the dark on the Iranian coup, to be totally honest.
And I could make the video on that. We'll have to see if it ever happens, due to the stuff in the background, which I'm going to try and see about dealing with as soon as possible. So with that, I hope that addresses the question fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. Thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel keep on running.
All right, and up next, we have a super chat from, let's see here, Psyops, who puts in a $20 donation and says, "Dear community, you might not know how much work is done behind the scenes, or the rotting filth sorted through to make the news nightly. The things we would see would make 4chan react, the worst of which is Texas. Muhaha. Thanks to those who have sorted through the hell that is raw video sources."
And thank you for the support. It, of course, helps us out a great deal, Psyops. And interestingly enough, while I do get help from the occasional viewer here and there with some news, believe it or not, all of the video sourcing is done by me. And so every single Russian and every single Ukrainian that ends up in an unfortunate situation, I see it. If a civilian gets, turned into pieces, I see it. I see it all. And I'm pretty much pieced together this whole entire news segment on my own every night. Iceland, though, sent me a massive amount of news clips over Discord. Just like today, I didn't get to see a lot of them, but I think some of them were the same ones that I did show in tonight's stream. I'm not entirely sure, though. I'd have to go back and double check. But Iceland did try and help out a massive deal tonight, but I still went through and found all of them on my own, mostly on Reddit, which is where I find most of these. Reddit's a great source of first-hand videos and news and information. Well, not information and news, but videos. I would say that they do an incredibly good job at finding the videos. Of course, Reddit can sometimes fall into the, depending on where you go, into the pitfalls of other places where it has a certain spin put on it. And I'm not going to say I don't put a spin on this sometimes. I do, but it's largely a true one. So with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And thank you so much, Psyops, for supporting this channel and helping us to keep this thing running. And so with that, we were on to the next one. And thank you once again.
All right, and next up, we have a $20 super chat from Oats Air, who says, take a question from the live chat. Slava LSA and Slava Ukraine.
And thank you so much for the support.
Excuse me.
Dang,
I didn't have time to mute it.
You went,
I was trying to reach for the mute button. I couldn't get it in time.
And of course, I thank you so much for the support, and we will answer a live chat in your honor. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and this one is sponsored by Oats Air, and the live chat question goes to 180 dude, who says, have you ever heard about the cyber warfare the U.S. did against Iran on their centrifuges?
I believe I may have, but it's a little bit hazy to me, so I would actually have to declare ignorance on that one, and I will try and look into it after stream. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well, but if I remember correctly, we implanted some kind of virus into the centrifuges in Iran, which led them to run astray or to just completely break down. It was one or the other, and it was highly effective. It worked, which was really nuts. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address the comment. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again.
All right, and up next, we have a $20 super chat from Anthony, who says, Enforcer, do you think that the tracer's rounds would help police and military forces shoot down the drone, since it would allow them to see where the rounds go? Also, I heard that Iran might give Russia new missiles.
And I thank you so much for the support. And to answer that question, I think that tracers would probably help, but then again, tracers could be a little bit difficult to supply depending on the availability of them. So I don't know if it would be a viable option supply-wise, but in theory, it would be a lot better than what they're doing now, which is firing blindly and hoping that the rounds somehow get near the drone and hit it. And even then, it might not cause enough damage to take it down. So I would have to say that tracers would probably be a great addition to try and take down those drones. And also, can you reread that second part, Matthew?
He said, also, I heard that Iran might give Russia new missiles.
I haven't heard about the missiles, but I would not doubt it. Also, apparently, Matthew, Iran and Russia had some kind of super secret meeting, and they let everyone know this. They had some super secret meeting about how they would destroy America, and it was just such a good meeting and such a good way to destroy America. They just can't tell anyone.
What a shame.
What a shame. I would love to know how they would really do that. I'm sure their army would really be able to win the day. But with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address the comment, and we are on to the next one.
And I see a lot of people in the live chat saying Stuxnet. I'm guessing that's the name of the virus that infected Iran's centrifuges.
Probably so, although I'm not entirely sure. I'm a little bit hazy on that story. But speaking of viruses, did you know the first computer virus in the world was called the worm?
I did, actually.
Yeah, the Morris worm. Oh, man.
Have you heard about the WannaCry virus?
No. You want to cry?
It makes you want to cry. I think it locked up your data or something, and they made you pay a ransom if you wanted to get it back, so people wanted to cry.
Huh. That's interesting. Honestly, those would probably make some interesting videos, but then again, not really on the topic of war. But still kind of neat. Anyways, with that, I hope we covered that a little bit, and we're on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $20 super chat from Carson Larimore, who says, can AA guns be used against the slower Iranian drones like the Germans of World War II, or are these weapons now obsolete?
They could be used. I believe we actually covered this in a previous super chat a little bit. They could be used, but one thing that everyone has to remember is the size of a Shahed. So let me pull that up. Shahed 136. So this thing is 11 feet long. and most likely an equal width. So it's 11 feet by 11 feet. If you compare that to a P-51 Mustang from World War II, which would have been a decently sized target at the time, especially at a lower altitude, or a Spitfire, you know, if you're talking about reconnaissance planes, you can see here that if we go down to the specs, wow, there's a lot of crap on the P-51. Jeez. Anyways, you see that a P-51 Mustang was 32 feet by 37 feet, almost 3 times the size in every direction of a Shahed. And the World War II anti-aircraft gun had a very low amount of efficiency. You had to have a large amount of them firing into a general area to try and hit anything. And so if you tried to do that with a Shahed, the amount of successes versus the amount of rounds fired would be a lot lower because the target is so much smaller. You could probably try and improve that by adding some kind of radar targeting computer to the AA system, but then again, at that point, you may as well be recreating the wheel, and you might as well try and find some kind of a modern anti-air system that could do the job as well. So, with that, I hope that addresses the question fairly well. I feel like they could work, but it wouldn't be as effective as a lot of people would hope. And so with that, I hope that answers the question fairly well, once again, in my opinion, so take it with a grain of salt. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
All right, and up next, we have a $20 super chat from Rob ICX Man, and I did that just to irritate him. Rob, I saw what you said. He said Iceman is what it stands for. It's spelled ICX Man, but it stands for Iceman. Somehow, I would have never guessed, honestly. But he says, awesome video. Enforcer, favorite YouTuber, please research and reevaluate comment of availability on nuclear fuel. Not 90 years, millions, my experience.
Well, I thank you so much for the support, Rob, and let's take a look at that. How much, and of course we have to do it quickly, so I can't sadly get into a lot of detail and rabbit holing, but how much nuclear fuel is there? There are 6.1 million tons of uranium in reasonably assured deposits. There are 6.3, well, nuclear fuel will last us 4 billion years, and this is on whatisnuclear.com. So, let's see. Breeder reactors can power all of humanity for 4 million years. I don't know what a breeder reactor is, to be honest with you. Also, let's read on this. Nuclear waste is recyclable. Once reactor fuel is used in a reactor, it can be treated and put into another reactor as fuel. Nuclear fuel used today almost all starts out as natural uranium, which has 2 isotopes in it, uranium-238 and uranium-235. The 235 is the one that we use, and it can sustain a nuclear chain reaction. That's also the reason why all of our nuclear reactors work off of uranium-235, because almost all of our nuclear weapons use uranium-235, so it's quite cheap to just use the exact same kind of nuclear fuel for both the weapons and the energy source. So that's why thorium isn't used a lot, because it would take a decent amount of money and expenditure to have 2 separate, I guess you could say, branches of nuclear fuel, and also I guess you could say nuclear, I don't know how to explain it, but you would have 2 separate routes. I can't find the wordage for it, but you would have a uranium-235 based research and use avenue for weaponry, and then you would have a thorium based research and use branch, pretty much, for your nuclear energy, like your nuclear reactors and all. And they say thorium's a lot more stable and can be used without the risk of nuclear meltdowns like uranium-235, because it's much more stable in its reaction. But I think only a small amount of testing has been done on that. I think that there should be more done, and if thorium does prove to be incredibly safe, they ought to go with it, because why not? Anyways, these are fertile, they can be changed. Because it contains some fissile material naturally, it's possible to build up a few kinds of nuclear reactors directly. But how much do we have? Okay, wait, I forgot. This is nuclear recycling. So pretty much it's saying that we will have about 4 billion years, according to this website, whatisnuclear.com, of nuclear fuel. So that is pretty interesting. And I think if that was possible, and one thing I gotta say is that nuclear power, and Matthew and me have actually gone and almost witnessed this firsthand. We went and tried to film a video in front of the Browns Ferry nuclear power plant in Alabama to talk about the Zaporizhzhia power plant, and then we started doing more research, and we found out it's one of the most dangerous in the nation. And then on top of that, we also found out that there was a fire on reactor number 3 just 5 days before we got there. So it looks like the safety issues hadn't really been fixed, but anyways, we know that it can be a little bit dangerous just from being around one and hearing about how dangerously it could be run. But that's...
Enforcer, I'll say this real quick. It comes down to the operators, basically. If the operators are idiots, it's going to go south, but typically the equipment is safe.
The equipment is incredibly safe for the most part, but if you have, I don't want to say this too strongly because, you know, I don't want to be too rude, but, although I was rude to that one guy tonight, but, you know, can you move on? Anyways, getting back to this. I don't want to be too rude, but if you have people who seem incompetent in running something as dangerous as a nuclear reactor, it can go out of hand incredibly quickly, like at Chernobyl, or at 3 Mile Island, or at Fukushima. Fukushima was really more so about poor design than poor operate, although it had poor operation. Anyways, pretty much it's all up to the operators. So I'd consider nuclear power to probably be the best option for sustaining humanity's electrical needs into the future. And seeing here, according to this website, although, and this was by Dr. Nick Turan, so I'm assuming that it has some credibility behind it. What about here? What about worldnuclear.org? Wow, Australia has 28% of the world's uranium. Nuts! I didn't know that.
We like Australia.
Yeah, we love Australia, guys. We love y'all. If you're in the chat, we love you. Moving on from that. Interesting. So, can we get a quick answer to this? You know, because I would love to read this, but due to the amount of time we have, we really can't. Let's see, according to this, a roughly 230-year supply at today's consumption rate in total, but that doesn't include uranium recycling and all that stuff. So we could technically, hypothetically, do that. And I think that would definitely be the move in the future to try and get towards nuclear power because, one, it doesn't take up a lot of land. Two, it produces an incredibly high amount of power for the amount of land it takes up. And three, it's incredibly clean. The only problem you have is trying to get rid of the nuclear waste if you ever have any, and if you can recycle it, the assumption would be that it'd be quite low. And so with that, I hope that addresses the comment fairly well. And thank you so much for the information, Rob, and thank you for clarifying that for us. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And also, I saw McLovin say in the chat, Enforcer Matt, do you have any good video ideas coming up? And I was thinking about doing the one on, you know, the history of Putin and how he got to be the way he is. But a good idea just came to mind. What about a video on the common assassination techniques that the Kremlin uses to take out its enemies? That would be a really good one, I think.
I think that would be a good one. There's also a lot of room for jokes.
Yes. You know. And I could fit a lot of information in 5 minutes in that one, I think.
You could. Actually, I'm kind of envious now, man, because that's a really freaking good idea right there. But with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And up next, we have a $20 super chat from Tom, ICX-Men, or Iceman. If Tom and Rob might be related. So if you are, that's pretty cool. If not, that's a strange coincidence. But Tom does not leave a comment, but thank you very much for the support. And Enforcer, real quick, would you like to add a few words?
Yes, I would. I would like to thank you so much for the support as well. It helps this channel to keep on running, and without viewers like y'all, this isn't possible. And so with that, I thank you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $17 donation from it's Chinese characters. I was trying to see if maybe I could say it, but I have no clue what I would be doing on that. I would like to recognize you, and I'm going to try to put that into Google Translate real quick. Just a second, Enforcer. Google Translate. Let's see here. Doing this very quickly. Fujimoto Amaya. I have a feeling that's a bad translation, but whoever you are.
Are you sure it's not Japanese?
It detected Japanese, you're right.
Because I was like, that is not a Chinese name. I was like, that is Japanese through and through. I was like, Hajimuto. Wait a minute, what was his name again? Hajimuto or Hajimutu?
Fujimoto Amaya.
Fujimoto Amaya. And also, I think I saw that one come in earlier, and it was in yen instead of won. And so I was like, it's a Japanese viewer. I was like, that's rare, you know, like that was really cool to me. But anyways, What is their question?
What do you think the end of the war looked like?
I think the end of the war will also thank you so much for being from Japan. That's really cool. We don't have a lot of viewers.
That is cool.
We don't have a lot of viewers from Japan, so I thank you so much for supporting this channel and also watching us. I'm sorry if we butchered your name. We're not incredibly good with foreign languages much at all. Of course, we only primarily speak English, and I'm glad you can speak it because we would have a very hard time speaking Japanese. I did try to learn it at the time, and I gave up because it just honestly seemed too difficult for me. So huge credit to you for learning both English and Japanese. But moving on from that, I think the war could end in a couple of ways. First, the Ukrainians could take back all their land and it ends in an indefinite war where there's a ceasefire, but the war never officially ends. The other way I could see this going is... sorry, everyone. For some reason, I'm feeling like I'm about to pass out. But the other way that this
You good, bro?
Yeah, I'm good, bro. But the other way that this war can end is that the Ukrainians could most likely retake everything and then allow the Russians basing rights in Sevastopol. I think that's most likely the two ways I could see that ending right now. So thank you so much once again for the support. Thank you for being a Lee Spring Army member from Japan. Like, that's incredibly rare. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for the support.
All right, and moving on to our next super chat. It looks like we have one from Jarrett Moshenko, who puts in a $15 donation and says, I'm third-gen Canadian Uke. From when fam escaped orcs early 1900s, Uke culture passed to us via Ukrainian dance. I taught Uke dancing to my daughters. Pass your Uke culture down through recipes, dance, and art. Slava Enforcer.
And thank you so much for the support. And also, that is a really cool story to hear. Of course, there's not a lot of Ukrainians in America, from what I know. There's a lot of Ukrainians, I believe, in... Actually, I can't think of a large Ukrainian population outside of Ukraine. Of course, there's always like a little something in New York, like a little Ukraine or a little Italy or Chinatown. But beyond that, I can't think of any large populations of Ukrainians around the rest of the world. And so that is really cool to hear. And also, of course, the Russians were persecuting Ukrainians back then. There was a large Jewish population that used to live in Ukraine that was subjugated to pogroms by the Russians. And a lot of y'all may remember a famous story made off of something similar to that called Fiddler on the Roof. If y'all have heard of that play, that is actually about a Ukrainian village of Jews. So really interesting story, and I'm glad to hear that you have made it to America. I hope you've been enjoying it over here since you're third generation. I'm sure you've known nothing else, and of course, America's got its downsides, but it's a great place. You know, it's got its pluses and minuses. I enjoy the pluses. Always try and be positive. But with that, I thank you so much for the support and sharing your story of your Ukrainian heritage. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you so much once again.
And up next, we have a $15 super chat from Krister Peterson, who says, Slava LSA and Slava Ukraine. And Krister, thank you very much for the support. And of course, Slava Ukraine, and we do appreciate it very much. And moving right along, we have a $10 super chat from Mike Leary, who has figured out the Morse code along with CFA, Mark Hodges, and WF2U. And let's see here. Let me get back down to that spot. Mike puts in a $10 super chat and says, Morse code message, it's really sad when you attack civilians to try and pretend you're winning.
And I thank you so much for deciphering that Morse code message, and you are correct. That is, in fact, the Morse code message of the night. And
ding, ding, ding.
Ding, 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 ding. You are correct. Sorry, I'm forgetting that because I'm still feeling like my head's spinning in a circle. But of course, you did get it correct, and I think that is a pretty sad thing, and I think the Russians ought to pay for what they've done to the citizens of Kyiv again out of spite. And so with that, I hope that does address the comment fairly well, and thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running and helping us to decipher those Morse code messages. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from James Franklin, who says, is there an estimate of how many people are killed by rounds coming back to Earth? Interesting question.
That is a great question, and unfortunately, we don't have an answer to that at all. I can't even give you an estimate of that, but I'm sure that it has happened several times. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support, but I'm going to declare ignorance on that one. It was a brilliant question, though. And with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Sweaty Chungus, who says, it's time for a no-fly zone. We are allowing genocide over fear of retaliation. How cowardly. Now, Sweaty Chungus, before Enforcer answers the question, I want to ask you a question. Do you think Russia would respond with nukes if we did a no-fly zone, or do you think they wouldn't, and that's why you're saying to implement one? Because in my opinion, I think that would be their cue to go nuclear, but that's up for debate.
I would have to. I see where Matthew's coming from with that. It's very hard to see and say that we should get directly involved because that will begin war with Russia directly. So it's tough because I want to help them out, but at the same time, it will invoke nuclear war. I think the best thing we could do is try and send even more advanced and more expensive weaponry to Ukraine for the sole purpose of trying to blast the Russians a little bit better. The quicker we can blast them out of the country, the quicker the war will be over. And so whatever means we need to give the Ukrainians to do that, I think we should. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And thank you so much, Sweaty Chungus, for helping this channel to keep running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $10 super chat from Justin Norse, who says, the United States, France, and United Kingdom plan to discuss Iran's drone transfer and say it's a violation of UN Security Council Resolution 2231. What else besides sanctions could be done about it?
I'm not exactly sure. Of course, direct military intervention is always an option, which is a war. We could invade Iran. I don't think it would be too difficult of a process, but the question is, do we want to get involved in the Middle East in a way for practically, most likely, a decade? And the answer for most people would probably be no. But the answer to me, not to be a warmonger or anything, would probably be, I think that should be on the table. One thing that I was thinking a while ago, and I don't know, maybe y'all respect this idea, is I was thinking about when Jimmy Carter was president, not getting political or anything, but just giving y'all the context. When the Shah was overthrown in Iran, and then there was the hostage crisis of the Americans that were stuck at the embassy. If I was the president at that time, considering the situation with Iran and how they had pretty much just flipped, and they were not on the side of the Soviets, they were not on the side of anyone, I would have just sent over to carrier task forces and said, you either give us those people or we start bombarding military infrastructure and we start bombarding the brand new Iranian Republic's government. If you don't give them up within 24 hours, that's what's going to happen. That's what I would have done. Because to think that the Iranians back then, and this will of course come into context now, to think that the Iranians back then would hold American citizens, and of course, you know, if you're not from the United States here, that's totally fine, but I feel like every country should have this stance about their citizens. Citizens abroad are supposed to have a special level of protection and respect. They're not supposed to get involved in your internal domestic affairs. And if for some reason you're Iranian, or let's bring it into America. Let's say if civil war started in America or some kind of coup, and you had a British embassy staff in Washington, you ought to go, hey, we're very sorry, but we're currently having a coup and overthrowing our government. We're going to be putting you all on a flight back to Britain, and we're going to send you all back over there. I feel like that would be the appropriate thing to do instead of pretty much holding them hostage. I feel like that's just the level of respect a foreigner ought to be given in a foreign country, is that they're not really in the know with what's going on there. Just respect that and send them back home. And so it really enrages me to think that that happened for so long, and I really think that everyone dealt with that a little too softly. I would have dealt with that a lot more harshly, considering that that's an American. You know, and of course y'all know my stance on that before, when the whole thing with the delegation going to Taiwan, and they were American. If an American is threatened at all, there should be a very strong and swift response, even if it's just one American. That's not right. And to think that the Iranians, you know, and bringing that into the modern context, to think that the Iranians are giving drones to the Russians to attack Ukrainian citizens, which is not in our interest for Ukrainian citizens to be attacked, or the Ukrainians at all to be attacked, I would consider that to be pretty high up there in terms of offensives that could be done, and considering that they're pretty much helping to facilitate war crimes, I would put that on up into needing a serious response. And so with that, I hope that that addresses the question fairly well, and I think that there should be some very harsh actions done against the Iranians because of it. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And with that, we are on into the next one, and thank you so much once again. Also, wait a minute, before we move on, I saw McLovin U tonight say Operation Eagle Claw. Yes, there was Operation Eagle Claw, but even then, it wasn't really, I feel like an action done for an American citizen, it shouldn't be done kind of like in a secret way like that, and that ended up being a failure. where you're trying to covertly get into Tehran and take them. It should be, we will rip this country apart to get to them and take them out. Your choice. I feel like that should more so be the answer, instead of we're going to try and covertly make our way into Tehran somehow and then grab them and then take them back out. I feel like that was a bit too quiet for my taste. It doesn't get the idea across, like we did with Somali pirates, that if you mess with an American citizen, the American government will be coming for you, and there will be no chance of negotiations at that point. Either give them up or it's over. And I think that should be the stance that every government takes with their citizens abroad whenever they get in a tough situation. Hell, I would have even, well, now I can't say that. But with that, I thank you so much for the support. Well, not the support. Thank you for the comment, McLovin. That was a great point. But I still throw that into kind of its own category. But with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $10 super chat from Randy Merrill, who says, are the Ukrainians out of American and British anti-tank rockets? I haven't seen them used as of lately.
And I don't, well, no, they definitely do have anti-tank and missiles, anti-tank and anti-air missiles. We have seen them in use just today. The Ukrainians are not running out whatsoever of any arms or ammunition. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address the comment. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $10 super chat from Jonesy, who says, good to have you guys to keep me company today, waiting for my hamstring repair surgery. Thanks for keeping me sane in Slava, Ukraine.
And thank you so much for the support. I'm glad we're able to help you out through your hamstring surgery. And of course, I thank you so much for supporting this channel and helping us to keep running. And I hope that we've been able to distract you from the hamstring surgery. I mean, I don't mean to hamstring you out here or anything, but that sounds like it would be pretty rough to deal with. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again.
All right. And up next, we have a $20 super chat from Just Chillin', who says, a horse is a horse, of course, and no one can talk to a horse, of course. That is, of course, unless the horse is the famous Mr. Ed. I just wanted to hear this, and I hope you're pleased.
Thank you so much for the support, Just Chillin', and I guess you heard it, so I guess we addressed that super chat fairly well. And with that, we're on to the next one, and thank you so much once again.
All right. And also, real quick, here's a question from the live chat for you to address real quick, Enforcer. Greg Monroe said, I feel like we are in World War III already. What say you? And Enforcer, I point that one out because I saw a guy today give a really good explanation for why World War III might have already started. But what do you think?
World War III, in a way, has kind of started to roll in the the ball started rolling for World War III. You could consider this right here similar to the Marco Polo Bridge incident in China in 1936 or 7. So in that way, it is kind of similar. But in other ways, it isn't. In some ways, this just resembles something like the Polish War of 1920. The Soviet-Polish War of 1920, or the Finnish Winter War of 1939. It does have the telltale signs that this could turn into a world war. That's one thing that is clear. But at the same time, it is kind of in that middle ground, I guess, the twilight zone, if you would call it, where it's kind of more of a regional war that has international support and has international interest, and is kind of moving towards in the direction of this could be a catalyst for a world war. It just depends on very careful maneuvering to see which direction it'll really move in. And so with that, I hope that addresses the question, well, the comment fairly well.
And Enforcer, real quick, me personally, I think that it's not the Ukraine-Russia war that's going to start it, the world war that is. I think it's going to be over there with China and Taiwan. I think that's what's going to start it, but I think the Ukraine war was the instability that was needed to cause it to kick it off.
Well, I mean, with China and Taiwan, that's a little bit of a rough one, because one thing that the Russians have not done until late in 2014 was threaten the Ukrainians' sovereignty. Until then, they respected it, until 2014, when their basing rights came into concern. With China and Taiwan, however, the sovereignty and the existence of the Republic of China has always been in question ever since the ending of the Chinese, well, the official ending of the Chinese Civil War in 1949, when Mao Zedong declared the People's Republic of China in, I believe, May of 1949. Anyways, I don't think that's going to be too big of a deal, because we can look at tensions, standoffs between Taiwan and China history. And you will actually see that it's quite lengthy. So right here, you can see one right here. The Taiwan Strait crisis of 1954 and 1955 and 1958. Here we can see that the tensions rose so heavily that the People's Republic of China bombed islands controlled by Republic of China, and the United States responded by actively intervening on the behalf of the Republic of China. So there have been instances where it's gotten almost into full-blown war, where each sides were conducting bombing campaigns on islands that were owned by each other, but it's never gone into full-blown war. So there is a high tolerance, in my opinion. Office of the Historian, we have that?
It's no longer maintained, I think.
Oh, where do you see that? Oh,
Or maybe it's just
man.
the website.
Oh, that sucks. That's lame. If they don't what? And the government's always cutting the fun
I
stuff.
mean, Enforcer, would it be a stretch to say that Russia invading Ukraine is like the equivalent of Germany invading Poland during World War II? That's not necessarily what drug everybody into World War II, but it's what caused the instability to get started, that caused it to break out into an all-out war.
Kind of in a way. Poland did have a couple of things surrounding it, though. First, we already saw the formation of the Allies with the United Kingdom and France, and they guaranteed the independence of Poland, I believe, in early 1939 or late 1938. So that was there, and that was not there for Ukraine. No one guaranteed Ukraine's independence going into this war, and that is the reason why no one has directly intervened through force of arms in Ukraine yet. So it does have that difference, because that was the catalyst for the Second World War in the European theater. Was that Britain and France had to follow through on their guarantee to Poland, and then they declared war on Germany because of it. That wasn't there for Ukraine. So in a way, with the ambitions of the Russians and the Germans in invading Poland and Ukraine, they are similar, but with the, I guess you could say, the extenuating circumstances that led to Poland being the catalyst for the Second World War in Europe versus Ukraine being the catalyst for the Third World War now, it's not quite there as strongly as it was for Poland in World War II. But there can be a case made for it. It's just that I don't feel like it's exactly the same with the kind of diplomatic cobweb that's been made. But with that, I hope that answers the question not too much in a dorky way, and hopefully it makes sense. But with that, we are on to the next one. Also, Matthew, how many super chats do we have left?
Oh yeah, and I forgot to mention we have 25 left.
Yes, and that's all right. With that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next we have a $10 super chat from Laura Carr, who says, "I just finished watching Dan She Calls. He says the price farmers are getting for the wheat and sunflower crops in his area has tanked and the silos are full. Is that because they have lost their markets?"
Can you reread that one more time?
Just finished watching Dan She Calls. He says the price farmers are getting for the wheat and sunflower crops in his area has tanked and the silos are full. Is that because they have lost their markets?
Sadly, I'm going to have to declare ignorance on that question, because I don't know who that specific person is and where they are to be able to talk about it all too well. And so I'm terribly sorry about that. But I do thank you so much for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you for helping this channel to keep running. But sadly, I don't know enough context about that specific person.
All right. And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Sausage, Gravy, and Biscuit, who says, "Slava Ukraine from your favorite breakfast food. Do you think the body bags coming home will influence Russian public opinion like Afghanistan?"
I think it definitely is. I think that's definitely one of the major reasons why we see that the Russian public is now starting to get dissuaded from the war, although the government's still intent on following it through, which does follow, historically, the same trend that happened in Afghanistan. The Soviet public, due to glasnost and perestroika, were openly able to criticize the war in Afghanistan almost from the outset, thanks to Gorbachev's incredibly liberal policies at the time in the Soviet Union. And so they were openly criticizing it, but the government was still adamant on pursuing the completion of that war, although it never completed, and they withdrew in 1989 in an embarrassing defeat. So I would have to say it's very similar in those regards, and I think the body bags will probably have the exact same impact. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address the comment. And also, I see a lot of people saying that we had a guarantee of protection to Ukraine in 1994, but what y'all are speaking of is the Budapest Memorandum, and memorandums are not binding like normal treaties and normal guarantees for some reason. I have no idea why, but that is the case. So sadly, the Ukrainians kind of got the short end of the deal there, and they went and agreed to a memorandum, which wasn't really binding, and they gave up their nuclear weapons anyways. And so it's kind of a little bit of an unfortunate story. But with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a very generous $90 super chat from Rope Access Work, who says German V-1s during World War II also had gyroscopes as control. Spitfire pilots caught up with them and tilted them with their own wing, so they lost their course. Can't you take down the Iranian drones with these old methods?
And I thank you so much for the massive amount of support, Rope Access Work. It helps out this channel massively. And to answer that question, the German V1s did have gyroscopes as a control, and Spitfires didn't tip them over constantly. However, one thing that the Shaheds, I believe, have is that they are remote controlled, if I remember correctly. Let's pull them up real quick and see. Shahed 136. Sorry if I'm kind of a little demure. For some reason, I felt like I was about to pass out a little while ago, and my head's still spinning, and I feel very nauseous, so I'm not really that energetic anymore. I'm just trying to survive, so sorry about that. But the nose section contains a warhead, as well as the optics required for a precision attack. So it is guided, apparently, and there is an operator that is looking through a camera on the drone that then flies it to the target. So unlike the V1 that was just told to go in a general direction and it flew that way, the Shahed is being piloted by a person. So if you tipped it over, they could just correct its course and continue to fly in that direction due to it having actual input. It would be like trying to tip a pilot over and have his plane slam to the ground. He could just then adjust for the tip and then keep flying. And so with that, I hope that answers the question, Rope Access Work, and I thank you so much once again for the incredible support. It helps this channel to keep on running, and of course, without y'all, this wouldn't be possible. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
All right, and up next, we have a $20 super chat from Just Chillin', who says, all jokes aside, I appreciate the hard work that you two do to bring us the real news. Slava Ukraine and Slava the LSA.
And thank you so much for the support. It helps us out massively, and I thank you so much for the kind words and enjoying this channel. I put in as much effort as I can. Of course, this thing is my passion. I love doing it, and this is something that I've wanted to do for quite a while, and I'm glad to be doing it. I'm glad that a lot of people enjoy our news coverage. One thing I have noticed, though, because I've been trying to think about letting this go, but it's starting to annoy me a little bit, is that there is a bit of a specific channel out there. And I'm debating right now whether I should call them out by name, because I'm not one to cause beef, but at this point it's gotten incredibly annoying. They have imitated our thumbnails, they have imitated our polls, they have imitated our intro card, they've imitated our titles, they've imitated everything. They have been on here before in the live chat, and they're now trying to take up our time slot. Now their stream runs into our stream, and we don't own.
It's on purpose.
We don't own the airwaves, but we've noticed this slowly over time. And at first, it was like, oh look, like that's cool. Like they got the same countdown card as us, like it was the same shape and everything. And now it's just getting to the point that it's like, it's almost like we're being ripped off, and it's really getting annoying to me that I put in so much work, busting my butt for 238 days to do this. And then just have someone trying to slowly supplant our time slot, and everything. I mean, almost everything's been supplanted. Matthew got annoyed by it when they started imitating the polls, even. We let it go for a little while, because we're like, okay, maybe he's just taking a little inspiration from us. But when he started to encroach on the time slot, and he had been streaming at a totally different time up until now, that's when we got clued in that the guy is doing a little bit more than just taking inspiration. And it's annoying, because I want to be on good terms with everyone on YouTube, but at this point, with this particular instance, it's just gotten incredibly annoying to me. And I've noticed this as well, is that they'll run their stream into the beginning of ours, and so a lot of our viewers are still over there, and I guess they're not getting a notification for ours, so they just sit there, and that one rounds out, and we see a decent amount of viewers just come on an hour in. They miss the first hour of news, because now this stream, the other one, is running into ours. And it's just, it's annoying. It's very annoying. I see a lot of y'all saying to call them out. But you know, and then Mr. Lunchtime said let it go. But and Mr. Lunchtime, that's a great point to let it go. But when you do what I do and you work 60 hours a week on this, and it's your whole thing, like this is all I do. Like when I go in public now, this is really all I can talk about because this is all I do. I work on this nonstop. And to have gotten this far and done all of this and perfected it over time, and then to just see someone just come through and just imitate the whole thing without really any thought for it or respect for like our style or anything like that, it's just incredibly annoying. I don't know if we'll name them, but just keep it in mind, we might name them before the end of the stream. I'm still thinking about it because I don't want to start a beef. You know, but at the same time, it's incredibly annoying. If they're watching, I would like if they take a quick note that we are quite annoyed with that, and we would like if you went back to your original time slot and also changed your intro and everything else that's been copied, thumbnails, titles, and everything, back to something else that is your own original style instead of trying to imitate ours, because it's very annoying to have done all this and then have someone imitate everything. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for enjoying the effort we put into it. And with that, and also Keep the Faith said, I noticed he actually stole your exact font on the thumbnails, and he did.
He did.
Yeah, exactly.
It caught both of us by surprise. We saw it and we're like, that's exactly the same font, color, and like the whole aesthetic to our thumbnails. When we saw it, we were like shocked.
Yeah. And you know, anyways, we're on to the next one, and thank you so much once again for enjoying this channel, and thank y'all for bearing with me tonight. It's been a rough night for me. I feel nauseous. I've had not to complain to y'all, but it's been a strenuous day all around, and so I guess I'm just trying to vent steam right now, but not too much. But with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next we have a $10 super chat from John D. Amato, who says, please pick a question from the chat, and thank you. And John, thank you very much for your support. And of course, we will go and pick that live chat, which is sponsored by John D'Amato. And it goes to JM Fan P, who says, what type of explosives are the drones carrying? Those are very big explosions.
The drones carry a 440-pound explosive on the front of the drone. I don't know the exact kind of explosive filler, but it is 440 pounds of high explosive. So it is quite a big bang, and it looks usually quite fiery when it explodes, but I still don't know the exact kind of filler. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from WF2U, who says, Iran being close to operational nuke is the red line for Israel. Iranian nuke facilities will be the third to be destroyed by the IAF. Number one was in 1981 in Iraq, and in Syria in 2018. IAF is ready for number 3.
And one thing I got to say now, one thing that it's a controversial topic is Israel and Palestine, but one thing that can be said is that when the Israelis get in a war, I haven't seen them, as far as I remember, lose one yet. And you got to give them a lot of credit for that, because sometimes the odds are really stacked against them. For example, the Israeli War of Independence was them versus everyone else who boarded them. So, you know, it's pretty impressive to see that they even survived that. But that if you get into the whole history of it, it's because they had B-17s and they bombed the Cairo International Airport. But moving on from that, the Israeli Air Force has actually destroyed a couple of nuclear reactors in its history. One of them was in Iraq, and one of them was in Syria. So it's pretty wild, really, to think that they've done that, and also pretty wild to see that they continue to be so brazen. The Israelis are an incredibly brazen country, especially with the Mossad, of which it's unbelievable to think they would just transport the Mossad around wherever, and they just do whatever they want, and they just leave, and for the most part, everyone's okay with it, which is just nuts. But anyways, with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address the comment. They lost the 1973 war with Egypt, did they? Israel, is that the Yom Kippur War? Yep, that is it. Did they? Let's see here. What's the result? Well, where is it? Israeli military victory, political gains for Egypt and Israel. So it was an Israeli military victory, but the Egyptians could claim a political victory, it appears. So with that, I hope that answers that question. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next we have a $10 super chat from William Allen, who says, "Ha ha ha, 10. Boy has the logi logistics changed his approach to the valid and proper use of the warthog. All wars are political, and the winners have the best logistics to support that effort."
And can you reread that one again?
He said, "Boy has this logistics changed his approach to the valid and proper use of the warthog. All wars are political, and the winners have the best logistics to support that effort."
Well, I thank you for the support, and I have changed my opinion on the Warthog a little, but it still has a massive caveat. It has to be sent over with a full operational package. So that's not just the A-10, that's all the supporting aircraft that are needed to make sure that the A-10 doesn't get shot down immediately. So with that, I would have to say... that... Also, thank you for that, Mandy. I was looking at that. I was about to try and address that. But anyways, I would have to say that I have changed my opinion a bit. Now, I don't think wars are entirely political in nature, and I know someone's about to pull out a quote that says war is just an extenuation of politics. It's more so diplomacy to me, which is under the umbrella of politics, but I consider it exclusively different, considering that usually diplomacy is a bipartisan thing, well, on some instances, and politics is incredibly polarizing. So, I see what you're saying, and I thank you for the support, and I hope I was able to address that comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again for the support.
All right, and next up we have a $10 super chat from AZScuba02, who says, "I'm a little behind in the stream, but only 5 A-10s were shot down during the first Gulf War, and that was out of 8,000 sorties, so they are very rugged."
And also, I thank you for the support, and that is interesting info to hear, and I will keep that in mind when talking about the A-10 in the future. And so with that, I thank you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from KG, who says, "Instead of using missiles and AA, why isn't Ukraine deploying more large-scale HERF technology on rooftops and outskirts of the major cities being hit? HERF can destroy the electronics of the drones."
Sadly, I don't know exactly why. I would have to get into a little bit of deep dive on that, and sadly, due to the way I'm feeling right now, like physically, I don't think I'd be able to do that, but I thank you so much for the support, and I will try and look into that at some point. And with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you so much once again.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from White Lightning 777, who says, "Do you think that the Russians have turned certain pro-Russian channels and personalities into Russian agents? And if so, who is most likely?"
Can you reread that one again real quick?
Do you think that the Russians have turned certain pro-Russian channels and personalities into Russian agents? And if so, who is likely?
I believe they have turned people into Russian agents, but I don't really know the exact Russian propaganda field of people all too well, rather than the one guy who talks like this. So sadly, I don't know a lot about them, but he's actually kind of changed his tune lately, which is really wild to see. But then again, we haven't heard of him much lately. Maybe he's been put in the gulag or on the front. And so with that, I hope I've been able to address that comment fairly well. And thank you so much once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Carolyn, who says, great stream, guys. How do Ukrainians sort the pro-Ukrainians from pro-Russians when they liberate Kherson?"
Well, I guess they would probably try and sort them out through their social media if they have one, or by people pretty much saying who was the pro-Russian or not. And so with that, I hope that does address the question as best I can. I know it's a little bit of a short answer, but hopefully it answers. Hopefully the answer is fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for the support.
All right, and up next, we have a $10 super chat from William Allen, who says, "American embassies are sovereign territory. The WUS did not protect the country."
Can you reread that again? I'm sorry, I'm starting to go through a pretty rough phase again, so could you reread that one more time?
William said, "American embassies are sovereign territory. The WUS did not protect the country."
And I thank you for the support, William, and I would have to say, once again on that, if an American is ever threatened anywhere overseas, in an unprovoked way. Now, here's an exception. If you're arrested in a foreign country and you're found with 30 condoms of coke inside your system, that's a bit different, because you're violating their law. But if you just go over there and there's some kind of coup and they're like, "Hey, look, an American, quick, hold them hostage," that is a totally different story. And that is something that I think should have a hard line put down. And someone did say earlier, a very valid point, they could have just killed the hostages at that point. Well, then we would have had an excuse to go and level the whole entire government that just took over Iran and then put back the Shah. Although I think the Shah had died. Well, no. He didn't die at that point. He lived in America for a while. You could have just gone and overthrown that government again and then put the Shah in charge and then just said, well, you shouldn't have messed with the Americans. If you had not messed with the Americans, we would have left the whole thing alone. But you did that. Then you killed him, and so we went in here and we messed with your stuff. So with that, I hope that does address the comment fairly well, and I think that hardline stances should be taken whenever Americans are in jeopardy. Of course, wrongfully in jeopardy. If they are violating the law of a foreign country, it is the responsibility of an American citizen to make sure that they don't unduly put themselves under the duress of being arrested in a foreign country and then put in prison under a lawful, not a lawful mean, like by violating that nation's laws. And so with that, I hope that does address the question fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. Thank you once again.
All right, and real quick to really quickly go over this poll, should NATO implement a no-fly zone in Ukraine? It looks like 53% said yes, we should, 17% said I don't know, and 30% said no, it's too risky. So it looks like a lot of you are gamblers, as you could say. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to go with the 70% of I don't know, because I can see it and I cannot see it. I can see it working as a moral thing. I can really not see it working as a long-term thing. So I'd have to fall within the 17% that said I don't know. What do you think, Matthew?
So personally, me, I don't think that we should implement a no-fly zone. As much as I would love to, I think that would set off a bad series of events. And also, you'd have to recognize that the actual implications of a no-fly zone means we're actually shooting down Russian jets. So that's about as much of a declaration of war as you can get between the United States or NATO and Russia. So I would personally say no. I don't think it's come to that point yet. And I know that's kind of like callous to say, but World War III might be pretty bad for a lot of people. So I think we ought to keep supporting Ukraine with equipment, sanctioning Russia, and doing everything we can except for that, because that would be a last resort. But that's my thoughts on it. So we're going to move on to our next super chat, which is from Mike Spike, who puts in a $10 donation and says, Shahed drone warheads are 88 pounds. You are thinking of the entire drone itself, which is 440 pounds.
And I thank you for the support, and I think I may be correct on that, because come to think of it, it doesn't make a lot of sense for the warhead to be 440 pounds. And so thank you so much once again. I hope that does address the comment. Thank you for correcting that, because I'm fairly certain that would be a lot more correct than mine. Also, someone said, Enforcer is upset that Starsky went on his rival's channel last night. Starsky does whatever he wants. He's been on everyone's channel, and Starsky's a great guy. And I don't care what he does, that's his own thing. The thing that has annoyed both Matthew and me, and I can't really blame you, because you haven't been with us all day, every day, while I do this for 60 hours a day. But the one thing that's annoyed us is that someone sent me a Discord saying, hey, this guy's imitated your intro card. And the intro card was the exact same as mine. It's got the little triangle in the bottom left corner that says stream starts in, and it has a minute countdown. It has music playing over it. There's an intro card that starts the stream. It's literally the exact same, like in formatting and everything. The titles used to be different. Now they include caps. And caps aren't special, but when you start to also copy my thumbnail with the exact same text font and the exact same kind of pictures, then it starts to get a little bit on the nose that it's direct imitation. And on top of that, I don't even view them as a rival. So that's that. Like, there are no rivals on YouTube, because we're not vying for, like an airtime on CBS. I run my stuff at the same time every night. It's been like this since day one. But still, no, that's not the reason. The reason is everything else that was our original work that we've been doing since the start, and now it's been slowly encroached over and over. And y'all have actually heard us, if y'all are very attentive, making jokes about this while we sit here and say, oh, I bet you someone's watching right now with a clipboard out and they're taking notes. Because we've seen this for about 2 weeks, and we've been saying that and wondering, well, what should we do? Because we're getting ripped off now. So with that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $5 super chat from the BK Knight 3, who says, it seems so bizarre that the Russian special military operation, has literally become an Israeli-Iranian proxy war. Can reality get much stranger? I'm over here just like dying.
Can you reread
Need me to reread that?
Yes.
Yep, I got you. It seems so bizarre that the Russian special military operation has literally become an Israeli-Iranian proxy war. Can reality get much stranger?
It can. I promise you that. So with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Augustin Lara, who says, great video, Enforcer Matt. Talk about motivation. Like and subscribe because a nuclear apocalypse might end us all. I'm paraphrasing, but close enough. And Augustin, wasn't that a very clever way to say like and subscribe? To talk about the nukes hitting quickly. I thought that was pretty clever when I was making it. I was like, oh, this is going to be good. But I thought it was, at least. Hopefully everybody else did. But also, I saw somebody saying in the live chat, to the 53% that said do a no-fly zone, go check out Enforcer Matt's vid on nukes. And yeah, I guess so. Go check out my nuke video, and maybe you'll change your mind maybe a little bit. But Augustin, thank you very much for the support. Moving on to our next super chat, we have a $5 donation from Who Dat Dragon, who says, the Kanavarites released a video of them shooting at retreating Russian soldiers. Why would they make themselves look so bad?
Because they may not know any better. To be honest with you, they're not incredibly bright from what I've been able to tell from any standpoint whatsoever. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again.
All right, and up next, we have a $5 super chat from Commander19, who says, if y'all are ever in Alpine, California, the greater San Diego area, let me know. I'll buy you a meal. Please read a question from the chat and Slava Ukraine. And Commander19, thank you very much for that support. And of course, we will read a question from the chat. And it goes to Richard Parnell, who says, do you think there's any way that the West can coerce China into exerting pressure on the Russia to cease and desist?
There is a way. The Chinese could say that they will also not support them and also enforce their own sanctions, which I think would probably lead the Russians over the edge because there wouldn't really be anywhere for them to go. So they would have to make some kind of rash decision, either to end the war or escalate even further. And so with that, I hope that answers the question fairly well. And thank you so much once again for the support.
And up next, a big shout out to Devin Betterton as well as William Jones for each putting in a $5 super chat. Thank you very much for the support, and they don't leave comments, but thank you very much for that. We also have a $5 super chat from Nicholas Sprouse, who says, how will Ukraine handle Russia destroying 25 to 50% of their power plants and water systems over the last week? This is worrisome with winter coming.
I gotta be honest with you, Matthew. I'm really having a tough time hanging on here. So could you reread that one more time?
And Enforcer, if you want, because we have, it looks like 10 left. We might just want to call it a night.
No, we'll knock them out. We'll knock them out with 3 live chat questions, and then we'll call it a night. So if you could have that one reread again.
Let's see here. That one came from Nicholas Sprouse, who said, how will Ukraine handle Russia destroying 25 to 50% of their power plants and water systems over the last week? This is worrisome with winter coming.
The Ukrainians will most likely counter that by rebuilding the power plants as best they can, or importing the electricity from abroad, most likely from Poland or a neighboring NATO state. And so with that, I hope that answers the question fairly well, and I thank you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $5 super chat from CA Lags, who says, stop drones with, number 1, cheaper SAMs, number 2, lasers, 3, medium caliber guns with proximity timed shells, or number 4, electronic weapons.
I would have to say that a combination of all of those would probably be the best. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support, and I hope that does address the comment. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $5 super chat from NOYDB, who says, Hromotsky channel on YouTube had an excellent interview with an active tank crew on the front line. I highly recommend, highly.
Oh, thank you so much for the support. I will try and check the video out, and maybe we can have them on here as a guest star sometime around. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that addresses the comment fairly well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Justin Lucazes, who says, please create a shorter format video compiling all footage and legitimate question and rant, but discording all thank you Slava question.
And I thank you for the support. And that's dude, that's actually one of the questions right here. I might try and do that, but you got to remember that these streams are massive. They're about 107 megabytes a piece, which is about the size of a big game. So it's very hard to download them and then edit them and then re-upload them. It would probably take so long that I would never be able to get around to a stream rather than once every 3 days. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Momoto, who says, do we think that Putin has enough power over Lukashenko's to force him into the war?
I think probably not, because I think both of them understand that the situation in Belarus is so fragile and the military is so incompetent that it really couldn't do anything worth of note. And so with that, I hope that addresses the question fairly well. And I thank you so much once again for the support.
All right. And a big shout out to Dean London, Michael Lawless, Dubsy Dabster, and Lyle Murphy for each putting in a $2 super chat, but without a comment. Thank you guys very much for your support. I know a lot of you have been around for quite some time, so we do appreciate you watching. Up next, we have a $4 super chat from Chili's Bees, who says, could slower flying A-10s be used to fight slow flying suicide drones?
They could be, but it would still be pretty difficult. Also, an A-10 would most likely have to attack from above, considering that the drones would be flying at such a low altitude. And so if it used its gun, it would probably spray onto the ground, probably into civilians. Or if it used a AIM-9, it would probably be pretty hard to lock on because it doesn't have a heat signature. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $4 super chat from Fuzz the Cat, who says, to be honest, you guys are the worst biased news I've ever had the pleasure of watching.
And I thank you so much for the support, Fuzz the Cat, and I'm glad you've been enjoying. And with that, I thank you so much for the support once again. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
And the final super chat of the night goes to CA Lags, who puts in a $2 donation and says, the crabs are molting and joining into a caillou.
And I thank you for the support. I don't know exactly what that means. I was waiting for Mecha Crab. But thank you so much once again, CA Lags, and thank you so much for being a long-time channel viewer. And so with that, we've now rounded out all of our super chats. I thank everyone so much for y'all's support. And we're going to be moving into 3 live chat questions and rounding out tonight's stream. And so with that, what is the first one?
The first one is from Surprise It's Us, who says, do we know how far the Shahed drones can fly?
I don't know in particular, and due to me not feeling well, I don't really want to pull that up right now. And so unfortunately, I'm going to have to declare ignorance on that one. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a question from Tony Snedcore, who says, what is the smallest weapon that could shoot down these Shahed drones?
The smallest weapon that could shoot down the Shahed drones would most likely be a AK-74 or a Stinger, if you're talking about a man-pad. And so with that, I hope that answers that question fairly well. And we are on to the last question of the night. And so who is the lucky last person who threw in the lucky last question of the night?
All right, and that viewer is Hulk Hogan, the WWE legend, who says, have you heard some congressman wants to cut funding to Ukraine? What are your thoughts on that?
I think that would be a poor decision, not in America's interests overseas. We have a sphere of influence that we have to maintain, and Ukraine could become a potential part of it, or a buffer zone in between us and the, I guess you could say, rival sphere of influence, or at least the partially dead sphere of influence, the Russian Federation. So it wouldn't really make a lot of sense to no longer fund the Ukrainians on continuing to fight this war, because if we don't, it eventually will become our problem at one point or another. And so with that, I hope that addresses that question fairly well, and we have reached the end of tonight's stream. I thank you all so much for watching. If you did enjoy, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. It has been an absolute marathon for me to get through this tonight, but we all did it together. And so with that, I thank you all so much once again. Please hit the subscribe button if you did enjoy. These streams run every single day of the week at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, except for Mondays. Everyone have a great night, and I will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover day 239 of the war in Ukraine. Good night, take care, and I'll see y'all then.
Запануєм і ми, браття,